Welcome in, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
This is Everything Sucks, Let's Fix It, episode 36. My name is Ben Merritt.
My name is Anthony Buono.
Today is February 20th, 2024. We have a packed episode, and Anthony just delayed us with an unexpected work call for about 40 minutes.
God, it was painful.
So we got to get into this.
We got to go.
Okay.
So let's start off with, I think, the biggest news of the week easily.
Yeah.
Alexei Navalny has died in Russian prison. The reaction around the world has been intense, and we'll go into that, but I want to give a very brief summary about kind of what his life has been like and why he's an important character. So if anyone doesn't know, Alexei Navalny was the main opposition leader to Vladimir Putin in Russia. He led anti-corruption campaigns since the early 2010s, and he has always been basically Putin's foil over the last 10 years.
Yes. He's been the main figure for anybody who's pro-democracy, anti-authoritarianism in Russia to rally around.
Yeah. So he really came to fame rallying around the 2011 elections. This was, I believe it was like a midterm election equivalent in Russia, and he was campaigning and protesting in these elections. He led this group of 1,000 around people in one of the squares in Moscow, and there was a police confrontation there where he was, a leading figure of that. Now, in these 2011 elections, international authorities have suggested that the election was rigged. Now, I want to take those claims seriously, and I wanted to try to examine how close, what I could learn about those 2011 elections. And the claims for election fraud are pretty substantial. To basically explain what's going on here, the way that they saw the vote totals come in from the different precincts around Russia, there are significant spikes around multiples of 5 in Putin-heavy strongholds. So all of a sudden, these Russian municipalities that are pro-Putin are coming up with 65, 75, 70, and it's all very exact. Like the line is going like this, whereas every other country has a very nice normal Gaussian distribution to it. And then, you got Putin's Russia just going like...
That makes sense. I mean, they're so lazy about it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, as the dictator that he is, and as the obviously sham democracy that Russia has had for the last 25 years, it makes sense.
It's funny because it's not even efficiency is one way of looking at it, right? It's like super inefficient. Like they're not good at hiding it, right?
Yeah.
But this is also people being really scared for their lives because if their municipality is supposed to return 85% and then they only return 82, they're like, shit, I got to get that 85 right now by any means necessary. You know what I mean?
For sure.
The Wall Street Journal did its own analysis, and they found that 14 million out of the 67 million vote casted were fraudulent. Now, I couldn't find the exact analysis that was done by Wall Street Journal, but that's what they were suggesting. Now, following this bout with the 2011 election, Navalny and his team released exposés on officials and business figures around Russia, including Putin himself, was exposing Putin for the different, I think there was like a massive mansion that he owned on the Black Sea.
I looked into this recently, actually. So I was curious about, I don't know what brought it to my mind. I was wondering how much Putin is worth.
Oh, yeah.
And if you look online, his net worth is something under $1 million. He plays off being super modest.
He might be the most richest man in the world.
Yes, the article that I read suggested he's worth around $200 billion. And apparently they narrowed it down to around 2004. He jailed some oligarch in Russia, and the other ones all came to him and they're like, what will it take to make sure we never get treated this way? And the folklore is that he responded half. They wanted half of everything they made, half of everything they had could just be paid as tribute to him. And one of the things I learned about was this mansion, which is the biggest property in Russia on the Black Sea, which is just Putin's play place.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Alexei Navalny was the one who kind of exposed that.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome.
Now, in 2013, he isn't just a journalist anymore. He's going to try to be a politician. And he runs for mayor of Moscow in 2013. This was actually the first election for the mayor of Moscow. It used to be an appointed position.
Okay.
This is the first time the Moscovites are electing their own leader. So he pegged himself to an established party titled the People's Freedom Party. He also formed his own party called the People's Alliance, but it didn't really go anywhere. The People's Freedom Party was what he pegged himself to have more clout. And so when the election finally comes rolling around, he loses. Now, what's interesting about where he loses and how he loses is his major opponent, Putin's ally, wins by 51%. Navalny comes in second, close to like 27%, way exceeding polls, way exceeding expectations.
Oh, okay.
Way exceeding expectations. He was like supposed to get like 15, 16. Navalny campaign thought best case scenario 25. He ends up getting 27.
Wow.
So, but his opponent gets 51%. Now, how lucky for that guy, he was able to avoid a runoff because he gets over 50% by getting 51%. So Navalny is able to do a little bit of digging, and he cooperates with some statisticians in Russia, and he finds evidence of election fraud in this election. And so then he refuses to concede and argues that it's rigged in court. Now, this is when the apparatus of the Russian state and lawfare starts going at him and starts basically threatening to like charge him with crimes of embezzlement. This comes to a head in 2018 when he decides to run for president. He decides to run for the 2018 presidential election in 2017. Okay, that's when he declares his presidency. Well, he was threatened to be thrown in jail for crimes of embezzlement. Okay, this didn't really stop him though. He was going to keep going, but by Russian law, there's like a whole bunch of intricacies that I'm not good well enough to know about. But he was able to stay out of jail to keep the campaign running for a while.
I wonder if he's campaigning just kind of with the intention of shining a light on the non-democracy of the system.
Oh, yeah.
No expectation to win.
No expectation to win.
Yeah.
No. He even calls for a couple times in his history, he calls for boycotting the elections because he knows they're all bull anyway.
Okay.
Which I'm never a fan of, but it is what it is. That's some people's strategy. But during the campaign, he's going around. This is when he gets attacked with chemicals. He gets sprayed with chemicals in the eyes. He loses 80% of vision in one of his eyes. This is a very famous attack in 2017. This is a really big deal. And then Navalny was sentenced to 20 days in jail on October 2nd, 2017, for calls to participate in protests without approval from state authorities. That's the real danger of living in an autocracy right there.
Yeah.
That's dangerous.
Totally.
So now, in December 2017, the Central Russians Electoral Commission bans Navalny from being able to run for president. He's done. He's out of there. And so Navalny dips. He leaves. He goes to exile. He goes to Germany, and he hangs out there for a while. But eventually he decides, no, this isn't right. I can't run away. And so he returns. And when he returned to Russia, upon him entering Russia, a few days later, he gets thrown in jail. And in jail, he stayed until he died a few days ago.
Yeah.
And so that's the life of Alexei Navalny. It's tragic. I mean, it's like he didn't get to see his liberal dream in Russia arise.
No.
And I hope, that the world leaders of the world and, people will be able to take up his mantle out of this.
It's certainly inspiring, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to be the main person in the spotlight of the authoritarian dictator, right? And standing up against them, knowing that any backlash against your movement is going to land squarely upon your shoulders before it hits anyone else.
Yeah, and I want to go to my next section here about, does Russia have another liberal hope?
Okay.
Is there someone after Navalny?
Yeah.
Does someone exist? And the answer is unfortunately kind of no.
No.
Navalny was like he was a personality figure that was able to kind of group together all these different factions, right? All the left-leaning people who wanted, down with the Russian form of government, all even like hard right nationalists who didn't like what Putin was doing. A lot of them also like Navalny. He was able to coalesce this larger coalition behind the phrase and meaning of democracy that other parties can't do. So, here's some examples. Leftists and communists are extremely split. The leadership of the Communist Party has cheered Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and this has totally alienated grassroots supporters of the party. So, the leftist communists aren't a true opposition anyway. They're like a play opposition to Putin.
Are they? I mean, I know because Navalny supported the invasion of Ukraine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. They can support the invasion of Ukraine, but also want democracy in Russia.
That's fair. That's fair. Liberals are almost universally against Putin and the war itself, but they are few in number, to be honest. There just aren't that many liberals in Russia to form a long-lasting, true political party with a lot of power.
Yeah, it makes sense given a political landscape that is completely barred conversation about liberal ideology for the past 25 years.
And so Michael McFaul, he's a Russian advisor. He was a Russian advisor to the Obama administration, and he said, "I don't see anybody of Navalny's stature left on the stage."
Which, again, unfortunately is props to Putin for completely effectively eliminating any kind of political opposition to him. Props as in, like, he's been effective at it, but it's not a good
dictator.
thing. Yeah,
he's
exactly.
been an effective dictator.
Yeah.
Someone who is coming out and trying to pose themselves as a liberal alternative is actually his wife, Yulia Navalny. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. She said that she would take up her husband's mission to topple Vladimir Putin's regime. She said, and I quote, "By killing Alexei, Putin killed half of me, half of my heart and half of my soul. But I still have the other half, and it tells me that I have no right to give up. It will be difficult." Okay, so no right to give up. She is going to try her best to take it to Putin, but this is not going to be easy because the people of Russia don't really look to her with much legitimacy anymore because she's been in Germany for so long.
Okay.
They see her as kind of disconnected to the Russian populace because she's been in basically exile. So whether or enough she has enough clout to actually have the same effect as Navalny, we'll have to see. But I'm glad she's trying. You know,
I suppose. Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
who else?
I mean, it doesn't really matter though,
right?
Because like even you're saying to have the effective Navalny. The effective Navalny is someone who, like, I don't know, occasionally started some protests and then got jailed and killed.
Right.
So like, there's no real change here. Like on the world stage, there's not a real outcome. It's just a great time to remind ourselves of how evil Putin is.
Right.
Right.
That's important.
Yes.
Thank you. It's an important time to remember how evil Putin is.
Yeah.
So because of that, I want to take us around the world and see how different world leaders reacted to the death of Navalny. Because the true thing that comes out of this story is to understand how evil Putin is.
Yes.
Perfect. Biden says, "We don't know exactly what happened, but there is no doubt that the death of Navalny was the consequences of something that Putin and his thugs did." Olaf Scholz of Germany. "But now we know exactly what kind of regime this is," referring to Putin.
Of course.
Then we have Macron. I think Macron is my favorite statement, actually. "In today's Russia..."
Macron is the leader of France.
Thanks. Yeah, Emmanuel Macron is the leader of France. "In today's Russia, free spirits are sent to the gulag and condemned to death. Anger and indignation. I pay tribute to the memory of Alexei Navalny, his dedication, his courage. My thoughts go out to his family, loved ones, and to the Russian people." That's an awesome statement.
Yeah,
it
agree.
talks about the absolute depths of despair that is the Russian government's persecution of the Russian people.
Yeah,
right.
I love "free spirits are sent to the gulag and condemned to death." It's damning of Putin. Like it's putting the blame directly on him and the government.
And what is so important about this is we understand how disgusting Putin is.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's Trump's statement on the death of Alexei Navalny. "The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression, and crooked, radical left politicians, prosecutors, and judges leading us down a path to destruction. Open borders, rigged elections, and grossly unfair courtroom decisions are destroying America," in all caps. And then in all caps, "We are a nation in decline, a failing nation, MAGA 2024. What the...
Selfish.
Is he... So... This is his only statement on Alexei Navalny, by the way.
Yeah.
This is his only statement. He didn't make any other statements about him at all, except in how he could compare Navalny untruthfully to himself. And he has no mention of Vladimir Putin's regime under any circumstance. No. Nothing. No condemnation, no denouncement, nothing. Almost celebration.
I don't know about almost. Let's chill. No, but I think, to me, it just screams it's like when you're watching a TV show and it's so obvious what the characters are doing, but the characters aren't supposed to know each other's intentions so that they can keep playing at the bit, right? To say like crooked radical left politicians, prosecutors, and judges leading us down a path of destruction, grossly unfair courtroom decisions are destroying America. To me, it sounds like someone who's trying to rile up a base to protect him the justice system comes at him. It's so obvious.
Yes.
Like it's almost painfully obvious.
It's almost painful that people will then look at this statement and be like, "You got him, Trump.
Yeah, and like,
good one.
Yes.
You got him, boss."
It's crazy.
It's like, what are you guys on right now?
But the truth is, of course, like Trump can't he can't go for Putin's regime. Like he can't attack it because he's his own values of what he will instill when he's in office are too aligned with Putin's regime.
We aren't suggesting that he's in Putin's pocket and Putin owns him. That's not true. That's not what we're suggesting.
No.
What we're suggesting is Trump just agrees with Putin.
Well, because Trump has said explicitly that he would jail his political opponents.
Yeah.
Because, of course, again, that plays into his story that he is being unfairly prosecuted for all of these crimes, and that the crooked radical left politicians are just forging these cases to get rid of him. Yeah. So when he sees, so he's using that to be like, okay, when I get into office, I'm going to strike back right at them. And so if he sees Putin jailing his political opposition, and he's explicitly said, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing, he can't really criticize what Putin is doing.
Yeah, I mean, no, he can't. Of course not. So we just, this is awful. It's the death of, a Russian attempt at liberalization. We'll see how the next decade plays out, like who comes after Putin and how that whole nightmare of a thing turns out, right? What's the successor going to be to that?
Yeah, I highly doubt democracy.
No, I highly doubt democracy. No. I don't even know. But point is, Alexei Navalny has passed, and Trump's statements on it are disgusting.
Yeah, the one other thing I'll add is I just saw today the Biden administration has said that they're going to enact more sanctions on Russia because of Navalny's death. Those are going to be coming out on Friday. We're recording this on Tuesday, so we don't know what those are yet. I was skeptical that they would even be able to, because their sanctions on Russia are already so strict and tight based on their invasion of Ukraine. But it'll be interesting to see how else.
I'm curious what else they're able to do.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. So the next topic is we're going to stay on this international stuff, and we're going to go over to what's going on in the United Nations in relation to the war in Gaza. This morning, so February 20th, America vetoed a ceasefire resolution in the United Nations again. Now, this ceasefire resolution was written by Algeria. In this ceasefire negotiation, it called for an immediate ceasefire and the return of all hostages without concessions. Now, the reason that America is saying that it's vetoing this is because it doesn't want an immediate ceasefire, because it doesn't know the logistical strength of an immediate ceasefire, if one is even possible. This is what it's saying. I don't believe that. Then it's saying that this statement of a ceasefire does not condemn the October 7th attacks. Now, Algeria was asked to include a condemnation of the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel, and they refused to put that in. So that's, I think, a fair reason to veto the resolution for a ceasefire. I think that's fair, to be honest.
I mean, I agree that they should have a condemnation, but is a condemnation going to have any impact on the substance? Like,
will a resolution have any impact on the substance?
I suppose not, but it doesn't change what they're asking for. What they're asking for is a ceasefire and release of all the hostages, right? The reason, like the story they tell in the resolution, probably matters much less.
I disagree because I think the United Nations is basically a play toy. All of it's political. It doesn't actually have any way to leverage its power.
Yeah.
All it has is its words. Okay. And so if you don't have this type of language in that, I can imagine how the U.S. and Israel can look at that as unfairly stacking the deck.
Okay.
By saying that condemnation isn't in there.
Sure.
But
yeah, that makes sense. The one other thing I'll say that
it's not like the UN passes this and then a ceasefire happens. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah. The other thing I saw about the U.S. And their reluctance to pass this particular ceasefire is they said that the negotiations that are currently happening for hostage release are sensitive, and pushing through this particular ceasefire resolution right now might interrupt those.
Yeah.
Which we can't know about.
And that's why they're saying the immediacy of the ceasefire is the issue, right? Because there are hostage negotiations going on at this moment, right? So then how does that play in with the immediacy of a ceasefire? But the United States, to its credit, and I will give them credit where they deserve it, I guess, they are proposing their own ceasefire resolution.
Yes.
They are proposing their own ceasefire resolution that is calling for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza as soon as practicable. So it's changing the immediacy of a ceasefire to as soon as practicable, which is pretty gross. But, because now that's just going to be able to use by Israel to say when Hamas is dead.
Yeah.
Right? Like Israel is going to take that as practicable as when Hamas is totally gone.
Yeah.
So there are other Security Council members who have specifically said, like, this falls way short of what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
This is not the goal. But the U.S. does know they have to do something, because Israel is on the path of doing something egregious in Rafah right now.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah. So on February 9th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he has ordered the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and the Israeli security establishment to prepare a combined plan to evacuate civilians and to destroy Hamas's forces in Rafah. Now, if you don't know where Rafah is, it is on the southern side of Gaza, borders Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is the most densely populated region currently of Gaza.
Yeah. So basically, as Israel is attacked, like they started at the very north part of the Gaza Strip, and as they've gone down, they've told the residents of Gaza to keep moving further and further south to get away from their attacks. To be clear, they have already also struck Gaza, or southern Gaza, including Rafah.
They have hit Rafah, one of the most densely populated regions on Earth, with 2,000-pound bombs. Now, the United States does not use 2,000-pound bombs on urban areas. Israel does.
Yeah. So the fact that they're saying, oh, now we're about to go in and strike, they're about to level Rafah the same way they have already Gaza City, right? And this is the place that they told all of these people to go, supposedly to be safe from their strikes.
So now he's saying the IDF needs to go in and evacuate all the civilians. You just destroyed all their homes.
Yeah.
Where are they evacuating
them to? Where?
to?
Yes.
Evacuate them where? Where do they go?
It's ridiculous. Like the the pretext that they can just constantly move somewhere else. They can always just go somewhere to safety as long as they're not in the one place. It's not true, especially because like these countries don't want to take Gazans in. Like these other countries in the region, they don't want
Egypt has
these
no
2 million
desire.
people.
Exactly. Egypt has no desire to take any Gazan refugees.
No.
Zero.
Yeah. So like there's no I mean, I think that plays into Israel's strategy.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course. Israel's been able to, play the different Arab states against one another, some for good reason, right? You had, Palestinians becoming a part of Jordan, and then I think they plotted to kill the king of Jordan.
Yeah.
You had situations where the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt was causing a bunch of problems, and then a lot of those guys move over to Gaza.
Yeah.
So Egypt doesn't want them back in.
Yes.
So
exactly.
I get it, but it leaves the civilians of Gaza in just a devastating position.
Yeah.
And the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths of the United Nations, said that over half of Gaza's population is, quote, crammed in Rafah, staring death in the face, with little to eat, almost no access to medical attention, and nowhere safe to go. He added that military operations in Rafah could lead to a slaughter in Gaza, leaving the humanitarian response at death's door. The United States and Biden needs to do something to stop this
from happening.
Attack.
Yeah.
Israel cannot be allowed to go into Rafah. If Israel does go into Rafah in the way that they plan on doing it, as stated, Biden needs to do some sanctions against Israel and stop any type of funding going on until it's over, because this is too much.
Yeah, this is.
It's been too much for too long, but this is ridiculous now. And Biden, obviously, right? It's been too much for too long.
Yeah.
Biden did come out and say earlier this week, or maybe late last week, that he's no longer in lockstep with Benjamin Netanyahu on this, which is good. I feel like I don't really know many other times where a president has said they're not in lockstep with something Israel's doing. I
suppose not, but again, there's no comparable situation to this in history. You can't even. It's hard to try to make that comparison. It's not nearly enough. It's you look at the sanctions that the U.S. has put on Russia, and you realize that like if the U.S. responded to Israel at a quarter of that harshly, right? Thousands of lives would have been saved already. So the fact that he's still dragging his feet, he's trying to maintain this alliance, but it's just like it seems like it can't possibly be in our interest anymore.
No,
it's completely delegitimizing us as the global hegemon.
Yes,
right, where we have been a relatively good one.
Yes,
over the past several decades.
Yes,
now we are accurately painted as the bad guy, as evil.
Yeah. And now what I hope comes from this is Israel has pushed America too far. And finally something's going to break.
Hopefully.
And the Biden administration can, look Benjamin Netanyahu in the face and tell him that he's gone too far.
I have two questions.
I just hope he does. If not, it's like, I don't know.
It's just like the evil U.S. that, like, I don't know, progress or liberals
talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'd be right to talk about it.
Exactly. Right. Like, two questions here. Do you think it's a genocide?
Oof.
Do you think it's a valid way to describe
genocide?
it? For context, like, this is a conversation that's been going around, and leftists particularly have been trying to push the idea that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. I mean, Israel had to defend themselves at the international court from this accusation from South Africa as well.
Yes. I don't know if I know enough to label it as genocide. It's definitely genocide adjacent.
It's
genocide adjacent, right? It's close enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters. Like, for me, I don't know if it matters to be labeled as a genocide exactly, because what is the definition of genocide? Is the elimination of a people in whole or in part with the intent of eliminating, a people whole or in part, or something.
That sounds
like
right to me. Yeah.
So, is the intent to eliminate the people in whole or in part?
The thing is, when you do describe it when you define it that way, I think there's so much evidence in favor of it being a genocide. Like, everything that comes out of the Israeli government says we do not accept the future existence of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, right. When Benjamin Netanyahu comes out and he says a river to the sea equivalent for Israel,
yes,
that's genocidal rhetoric. Full stop.
Yeah,
that's genocidal rhetoric. That's him being a genocidal maniac.
Yeah,
right. Whether or not that's the exact policy that's getting implemented right now, I genuinely don't know.
It's like, I hear you, as in, like, when you compare it to what Germany did to the Jews.
Which is also the most extreme example, though, right? Because if we look at Serbia, I would definitely say what the Serbs did against the Bosnians was a genocide.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the elimination of a people whole or in part.
Yeah.
But it makes it difficult because I don't know if Israel is killing Palestinians as, like, a way of war rather than, like, a mass system of death.
No, and I think that's fair, because we still do see, like, so much evidence that Hamas has these military bases and operations in civilian areas, in civilian buildings, in hospitals. I think a report came out that a Hamas tunnel base was built literally underneath the UN building that was there.
Right.
Like, so...
And so, like, in Serbia with Srebrenica, I think is the one, the comments will correct me on that. In Srebrenica, they were literally just fucking murdering and raping hundreds of women and children. Yeah. And, like, literally in the war, they had concentration camps. And it was the first time concentration camps had been on European soil since Germany.
And there was no preemption of that.
No.
Right? There was no October 7th.
Right. There was like a civil war going on with the breakup of Yugoslavia, but it wasn't like this, intense, I don't know. Like, with, there wasn't an October 7th equivalent.
Yeah. There wasn't a
in
spark
that.
Like that.
So, like, with it makes it difficult for me to call it a genocide, though.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you do? Would you do it?
When I first thought about it, I was thinking about the West Bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing in the West Bank is much less extreme than what they're doing in Gaza, and yet their actions and what they're promoting Israeli settlers to do points towards, let's eliminate these people, right? And it's like okay, well, the West Bank is already still controlled by Israel.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be where Palestinians live in apartheid state, more or less.
Yeah.
But then they encourage Israeli settlers to go in and to commit violent acts, and seems to me like slowly wipe them out.
See, so for, like, I view what's going on in the West Bank as an almost decentralized genocide. Right.
Well, if you think that, then I think it's hard.
But what's going on in Gaza is not decentralized at all.
Okay.
Right. It's a war going on.
Sure.
In Gaza.
Okay.
And so I would you, like, Iraq by the United States wasn't a genocide?
No. What's going on in the West Bank, you call it decentralized, and it is being carried out by citizens, but it is being directed and encouraged by the government.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think that, I guess the question is that enough of a connection to call it genocide on the on the part of the government, but does it even need to be on the part of the government? Does it matter if it's decentralized or centralized?
I don't know if it does.
To me,
not.
I think it's just I think it could very well be the leadership of a genocide with two different strategies in two different places, right? And October 7th has just given the excuse to carry it out much harder in Gaza.
So, but then the question is, do you think there was a way for Israel to go to war with the Palestinians in Gaza that would not be a genocide? Like how would
they could listen to the pleas of the Biden administration, Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, in saying, let's go in with more precision attacks and not hit them with these enormous 2,000-pound bombs and missiles. Yeah. Right? They could. Of course, there is a reason for them to push back against that. It does risk the lives of Israeli soldiers more, but I would definitely have a harder time calling that a genocide. Right?
I guess. It's
not 100% clear. I don't like the leftists that are saying it's 100% clear. I don't agree with, but there is a lot of evidence there.
I do think there's a lot of evidence there when the rhetoric from the government comes out and they say we want to control all the land from the West Bank to the Gaza Strip.
Yeah,
that they want it all under Israeli control. That's nothing more than genocidal rhetoric, because then what does that mean you do to those people, right? It has to be an elimination of whole or in part.
Yeah.
Right? There's no alternative to that. Yeah. It's a good question.
The only other question, God, we're talking about this forever, but I wonder if Israeli aid is taken off the table. Say we're looking at Congress, we're looking at this international aid package. Does that mean Ukraine aid is that much more impossible?
I think if Israel aid can't get through, Ukraine aid is done. Done. Absolutely done. If like we tried to decouple Israel and Ukraine aid ain't gonna happen.
I agree.
So the only way that we could, God, it makes it difficult, man.
But also, like, Ukraine aid didn't get through even when coupled with Israel aid and border security package. So like, is Ukraine aid possible?
No, but that's a whole other thing, though. But when you talk about the border thing, that's like a whole other
I mean, is it? Because
yes.
Because even when they tried to pass a standalone Ukraine-Israel package, then they brought up we have to do something about the border
that's
first.
What I'm saying. Like it's all political. Like that's not a good way. Like I don't think that there is a way to pass it.
Ukraine aid, period. Just because they can't.
No, I think the way you pass, the only way you pass Ukraine aid is through a discharge petition with Israel funding on it, right?
Okay.
Which we talked about last week, but discharge petition is how you can scoot around the Speaker of the House, and so Democrats can work with like two Republicans to get it done. But yeah, it's a mess. I hope the U.S. does go through with the ceasefire resolution. I hope they change the language from as practicable to immediate. And I just. Oh, God, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is truly a nightmare.
All right, let's get over to some national politics now. I want to talk about what recently went down in Wisconsin, because in a lot of ways, democracy was just restored. And so before I go into the history of this, I want to talk about where we are right. So what recently just happened. So Wisconsin had crazy gerrymandered maps for a long time. And now recently, we've just gotten new maps ordered by the Supreme Court that are now going to be more of a 50-50 split between Republicans and Democrats. So both Republicans and Democrats can have a chance to win the legislative branch of the Wisconsin government. So now I want to take you on this long journey of how we got here and how democracy died in Wisconsin, which I think is actually the name of an Atlantic article written.
Really?
I think I didn't read it for this podcast, but I think I remember reading that a few years ago.
Okay.
How democracy died in Wisconsin. Anyway, so since 2010, Republicans have had total control of the Wisconsin legislature. I'm going to focus really on the Wisconsin Assembly, not the state Senate for this, okay? But this is not because Republicans were so popular in Wisconsin. Keep in mind, Donald Trump won Wisconsin by 0.07% in 2016.
Wow.
Biden won it by 0.06% in 2020.
Wow.
It's a very close state.
Wow.
So you would expect the state assembly to be relatively close, right? Well, it's not. In 2018, Democrats won 53% of the popular vote for state assembly races. Republicans won 45%. Who do you think won the House? Who do you think won the assembly? The Republicans did. Republicans won the assembly with 45% of the vote. And they didn't just win it by a little. They won it by a lot. They had 63 seats compared to the Democrats' 36.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You want to talk about gerrymandering? This is insanity. So a +8 result for the Democrats resulted in a minority of like 18 seats.
That's wild. This gerrymandering capital of the country.
So then how did it happen? How do we get these crazy gerrymandered seats? Well, on October 1st, 2018, there was a nonpartisan election for a Supreme Court seat. Now, in Wisconsin, they don't appoint Supreme Court justices like we do on the national level in the federal government. They elect them statewide. So a conservative judge won this seat 51 to 49%. And the Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce poured so much money into the seat because, the capitalist class knows how much these Supreme Court seats really matter. Okay. So this entrenched conservative power in the Supreme Court in the state. This is what made the conservative Supreme Court powerful enough to get what they needed done going forward. Okay. This nonpartisan election. On November 2008, Obama gets elected. And because of this, Democrats down ballot ride his coattails and they take over the assembly. They take the state Senate. But immediately following Obama's election, there's a massive conservative reaction. And this is when we get the 2010 midterm elections. The 2010 midterm elections is known as the Tea Party Revolution across the country. Republicans gain 60 plus seats in the House of Representatives. They gain a bunch of Senate seats. They win governorships in blue states, one of which was Wisconsin. Scott Walker becomes the governor of Wisconsin, getting 52.25% of the vote, and the Republicans take the assembly. Okay? Now, this gave the Republicans the crucial power of controlling the redistricting process that takes place every 10 years following the census. So every 10 years, we take a census of the country, and then we draw our maps in which we base our representation on based on that census. And so Republicans now had control of that process. And so legislative hearings on the map were held July 13th, 2011. Now, Marquette law professor Richard Eisenberg testified to these maps, and she said that they would not be able to withstand any legal challenge. She said they were so gerrymandered that there's no way that these would stand any legal challenge.
Okay.
In Wisconsin law, you're not allowed to gerrymander. They have rules against it in Wisconsin Constitution.
Okay.
There's a constitutional amendment that makes gerrymandering practically illegal. You have to do it by some crazy means if you want to make it legal.
Okay. And this is like super clearly gerrymandered.
Yes, that's what she was
horrifically
like,
clear.
This is so clearly gerrymandered that this is obviously unconstitutional.
Okay.
Right? They need to be like specific amount of compact and whatever. If you're interested in elections, you'll know what I mean by that. If not, then take my word. Democrats called the plan just totally unconstitutional power grab, right? They're like, the process moved way too quickly. It was like 20-something days that they drew the maps and wrote them up, okay? And so Democrats are like, wait a second, you didn't consult us at all. You drew them way too fast. You totally obviously broke the law. But Walker disagrees. Scott Walker comes out and he says the maps passed by the legislature meet the criteria laid out by the courts, including communities of interest, fair minority representation, and compact contiguous districts. So now he's using the constitutional language to try to justify the maps.
Yep.
Right? He's pulling language out of the Constitution in public support of the maps to try to make it seem, if this ever goes to a court of law, that, look, no, we were constitutional about it. We even said so in our public briefing.
It's a smart move.
Yeah. But this didn't stop the legal challenges. A group of citizens asked a federal judge in 2011 to throw out the new maps approved by the legislature, allegedly that they violated both the state and U.S. constitutions, as well as the Federal Voting Rights Act. Now, the Federal Voting Rights Act is the one that gets the big focus in this one here, because there was a split in a Milwaukee near Milwaukee that underrepresented Hispanic community.
Okay.
Right? They split the Hispanic community down the middle, and so it was 2 Republican seats instead of what could have been 1 Hispanic blue seat. Okay. So in mid-November, the 5 Republican U.S. House members actually filed paperwork to intervene in the case to protect their own interests. So now we have U.S. House of Representative members getting involved in this court battle. The Democrats come in, and now they join the fight. And now it's this massive partisan battle between federally elected Republicans, federally elected Democrats. And so a 3-judge panel is appointed. Now, this 3-judge panel is going to preside over the whole process here because it's getting crazy. And then in this process, during discovery, the 3-judge panel finds a letter that was written to Republican lawmakers that read specifically, and I quote, "Public comments on this map may be different than what you hear in this room. Ignore the public comments." So Republicans were writing to each other, flatly admitting that what they were saying to the public was lies.
Yes.
They were flatly admitting this.
Yeah. That's wild.
They knew the validity of the maps and the fairness of these maps were in question, and they were lying to you when they told you that it was fair. Scott Walker going up and giving you his fancy constitutionally appropriate language, he knows it's all a lie. It's written that they knew it was a lie.
Yeah.
So the 3-judge panel actually ended up upholding the maps. This is due to those Supreme Court elections, right? Because now it's a conservative people who are appointing these judges. But point is, the one thing that they did win out of this was a new Hispanic district coming out of Milwaukee. Okay. So that what I mentioned before about the voting rights district, the Democrats got one more thing out of Milwaukee. This didn't stop the Republicans. They tried to appeal this, but the Democrats ended up winning this. They got the Hispanic district in Milwaukee. So now, quickly, I want to go into what Republicans did with this majority. Republicans now had basically super majorities in every legislative body. They had the governorship. What did they do with it? What did they do with all the power that they got, that they stole? Well, they decreased the amount of government workers' pay by an enormous amount. They cut education by billions of dollars over the course of Scott Walker's administration. They cut university funding. They signed right-to-work legislation for private sector unions after Scott Walker promising that he was not going to pursue right-to-work legislations for private sector workers. He did it anyway because he needed their votes. And so he was playing on their conservative social agenda of being against gay marriage to get them to vote for him, and then he stabs them in the economic back with right-to-work legislation that no union man would support under any circumstance.
Yep.
So that was what they did when they finally got the power in Wisconsin. Now, Scott Walker was finally defeated in 2018, and this is when the story takes a turn. Tony Evers beat Scott Walker 49.5% to 48.4%, a very, very close election.
Yeah.
But Evers is able to eke it out. And because of this, the tides finally start changing. And what's happening here is political alliances are shifting. We're going to get into this later in the show, but political alliances in Wisconsin started shifting. And Democrats started winning the higher turnout voting populations, such as college-educated voters, and Democrats started to become very strong in nonpartisan, low-turnout special elections.
Yep.
Because now Democrats are winning college-educated people. Those are the people who vote in April. Those are the people who vote in the primaries. These are the people who are going to help you win the Supreme Court. And so this is what Democrats start doing. In 2018, a progressive gets elected to the bench in 2018. In 2019, progressives hold a seat. In 2020, progressive Jill Karkowski defeats conservative incumbent Daniel Kelly. Now, what's notable about this guy, Daniel Kelly, is that he was appointed by Scott Walker. He didn't win any election to get there. He was appointed because of early retirement. So now he faces election and he loses. And so that's a flip, right? Then we have progressive Janet Prasteyowitz.
Ooh, I don't know, man.
Yeah, whatever. Janet. Yeah. Janet. She is recent. She got elected in April 2023. She's actually one of the first. We talked about her on one of the first episodes of our show.
Okay.
She beat Daniel Kelly by 11 points, kicking his ass.
Yeah.
And so Janet ran much of her campaign specifically on fighting for fair maps. She said that we were not going to see the type of 2020 gerrymander into the next decade. She said this specifically on the campaign trail. And Democrats were able to clean the clock since 2018 of every Supreme Court election, winning every single one up until now. And because of that, in a 4-3 decision on December 22nd, the Wisconsin Supreme Court held that Wisconsin's voting maps as currently drawn, violate the state's constitution and must be redrawn in time for the 2024 election. The current maps were instituted by the court in 2022, which was then controlled by 4-3 conservative majority. Now that it's switched, these maps are done. So Tony Evers has passed new maps. These maps have 45 Republican-leaning districts and 46 Democrat-leaning districts. 8 are going to be toss-ups in the assembly. Now, Republicans ended up having to vote for this plan. They didn't have a choice. because they control both the both legislative branches in the House and Senate. But these were the only options they had.
Wait, what do you mean? Since they controlled both houses, they had to vote for this plan?
So Tony Evers went to the court. The court said you have an option of 8 plans.
Okay.
Republicans picked the most non-liberal of those 8 plans.
I see. Okay.
Those are the only ones they were allowed to pick from.
Okay.
That was it. That was the best they could have gotten.
Okay.
That would have coincided with the Supreme Court decision. So these 8 toss-up seats are going to decide basically every Wisconsin election going forward. And the fact that now both sides can win majorities means there will be a healthy democracy in Wisconsin for the first time in 14 years about.
It's a very happy ending.
It is actually a happy ending, to be honest. It's a good feeling. It makes me it makes me happy that the institutions are strong enough to correct themselves.
Yeah. Even if it takes 15 years.
Even if it takes 15 years to restore democracy to a state in the United States of America.
Yeah.
But it's just a good feeling to get that. And now Wisconsin can make some really amazing changes. Minnesota, with a very, very slim majority, has been kicking ass with progressive legislation.
Yeah.
Getting free lunches and free breakfast to children.
Yeah.
Getting good zoning housing reform done. Michigan has repealed right to work, something that Wisconsin most certainly will do if they get Democrat majorities, which is now absolutely possible.
Yeah.
They could repeal right to work. I think Michigan is the only state in the history of America to repeal right to work.
Wow.
And so now Wisconsin could be number 2 if Democrats take back the legislative branches.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about all this?
I think it's nice to see that when something sucks, we can fix it.
Yeah, that's a great way. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
And I like that, it doesn't make me feel like Democrats are the bad guys. It's like Democrats didn't just swing it completely to their side. They actually made it democratic.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I will say, listen, they couldn't swing it on their side if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. Because then they would have gotten screwed by their court. Right. So there was a healthy balance. And because of that healthy balance, bam, we have democratic maps now.
Yeah.
And not big D, lowercase d.
Yeah. I'm happy about it.
Very happy.
Cool.
All right. In addition to all this great news going on in Wisconsin, for Democrats, Tom Suozzi, a New York representative, has come back out of retirement to win a special election last Tuesday. So Tom Suozzi represented New York District 3 for around 6 years, but he dropped out in 2022 to run for governor of New York, where he ended up losing to Kathy Hochul in the primary. But now that seat, after he left, got picked up by George Santos, our favorite comedian / fraudster. Yeah. George Santos won New York District 3. Now, obviously, we all know that he's been kicked out of the House of Representatives for being a lying, crooked fraudster.
Yep.
So they had to host a special election, and Tom Suozzi was able to defeat the Republican opponent, Melissa Pilip. It might be Philip. I might have spelt that wrong.
No, it's actually Pilip.
Is it actually?
Yeah.
That's
I
really
listened
funny.
to a podcast on this, so I am confident.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, you're an expert. You listen to a podcast. That's what they're all thinking right
That's
now.
all I know about pronunciation. That's the one thing you can count on me for.
Oh, man. See, I'm deaf. That's why I can't pronounce anything.
Of course.
So quick little breakdown of what these election results mean, and kind of I wanted to compare what happened in 2022. Really, I wanted to see okay, where did Tom Suozzi do well, where George Santos cleaned Robert Zimmerman's clock last time in 2022. That was the Democrat nominee back then. So one area where Tom Suozzi actually kicked some butt was in Oyster Bay. Oyster Bay is a pretty historical Republican area of New York, and Tom Suozzi did pretty well, pretty impressively well. And there are other Great Neck. Tom Suozzi did really well. Mineola is one of the most Italian places on Long Island. I think it's the most densely populated area on Long Island of Italians. Okay. And Tom Suozzi made great inroads. He didn't win it, but he got very close. And now I'm very happy to say the entirety of Long Island is represented by Italian men.
Wonderful.
Yeah, very proud. Very proud. Now, quickly going over the results here, George Santos won the district 49.35%. George Santos won 53.7% compared to Robert Zimmerman's 46%. Tom Suozzi ended up winning by 54% to Pilip's 46%. So he basically flipped it.
Yep.
Right? He basically got rid of the entire margin of the George Santos swing in 2022.
16-point swing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but if this type of swing happens nationally,
yeah. But I think that is getting too ahead of ourselves.
It won't.
Yeah.
It won't happen that nationally, but we'll get into that in a second. What is it? First, let's get on to what this means politically right now. What does it mean for this moment? Well, Republicans currently have the House majority, right? Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House. Well, it's getting harder and harder to do that job because now Republicans only have a 2-seat majority, down from 3 after Tom Suozzi wins this seat. So it's unlikely that they're going to be able to pursue their more like extremely partisan legislative agenda. Like impeaching Joe Biden's going to be pretty much impossible now with only a 2-seat window.
Yeah.
It's pretty much done. There's really no way you're going to be able to pull the moderates over to impeach him.
Yeah, no.
It's practically done. So that leaves Mike Johnson and the rest of the far-right Republicans basically just drowning in water. There's
they've
nowhere
been
for
left
them to go.
hanging.
Yeah, they have nowhere to go. So then what does this mean for Democrats? Right? We definitely need to take into account that those who vote in special elections are not necessarily the same people who vote in November general elections. Nate Cohen of the New York Times, he's been saying this for months now. He's like, don't even look at the special elections because these are college-educated, highly in-tuned voters. And this is not what the median voter is going to look like in 2024. It's almost irrelevant. I don't think it's irrelevant. I think election results are a pretty good predictor of how elections will play out later on. I don't know if I totally buy his whole theory here, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, right? The populations are definitely different. They're more likely to have college education.
Yes.
Right? So, yeah. But then, like, what does the victory mean for Democrats in the sense of what can Joe Biden learn from this? What can Joe Biden learn from Tom Suozzi? What did Tom Suozzi do that Joe Biden can take with him into the general election? Okay. Well, let's look at what Suozzi did. One thing he did was he attacked Republicans incessantly for killing the bipartisan border deal.
Yes.
He pounced on Pilip and the Republican Party, saying that they're dysfunctional, saying that they're a lost cause, saying that they're a chicken with their head cut off, saying that they don't know what they're doing. They're not serious people. They don't know how to work together.
Yep.
They don't know how to cooperate. And he's going on and on and off on that. But he also is going on the other end. He's attacking the left. And he's saying that the left wants open borders. I don't want open borders. I don't want open borders. I don't even know how true that is, right? Because he's honestly pointing out a straw man that no one's actually talking about.
About open borders?
Yeah, because no one on the left is actually sitting here saying
no
open borders. No one's saying that.
No, of course not. Like Biden just advocated for the bipartisan border bill, which specifically allocates billions of dollars to crack down on illegal immigration.
So like when he's saying open the borders, he's basically just doing like a virtue signal to a bunch of conservatives pointing at nothing,
which could be smart,
which is very smart.
Yeah,
which is genius, which is exactly what you have to do.
Yeah,
like, and it gives you so much more respect and like the aura of a rational and reasonable actor.
Yeah, an independent mind. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're not just, I mean, even though I expect him to get into Congress and vote along party lines whenever they need him to.
He actually voted 100% with Joe Biden.
Exactly. So it's good rhetoric. It doesn't mean anything about how I'll actually legislate.
Yes, but it's a great campaign strategy.
Yes. I will say it's a campaign strategy that Biden obviously can't use. Because
I disagree. I think Biden could absolutely say he doesn't want open borders and then point to an aforementioned left.
I don't know if that's true. I think because he is the left now.
Well, I don't.
As the head of the party. Like, I think Suozzi can do this because, to me, like, what's conjured up in the mind of a voter who's listening to Suozzi when he says, I'm not like the left, I don't want open borders, is like, oh, you're separate from the rest of the party.
No, I don't,
including the leader.
I don't think I agree with that. I think I think what comes up is AOC. I don't think it's Biden.
I disagree.
I don't think so.
Just because Biden's a bigger figure.
No, but I don't know. I do not think that when he says hold on, let me get my thoughts here. Tom Suozzi, when he says, I'm not for open borders like the left, he then goes on to praise Joe Biden's policies in regards to the bipartisan border bill.
Okay, I think we might be having an argument over nothing.
Okay.
Because his actual words, which we don't have in quotes here, and the context of them would completely change what we're talking about.
Okay, fair. So another thing Suozzi did that I love him for was he held Pilip's feet to the fire in a debate that was awesome to watch. He went off on her and he forced her to say whether or not she was pro-life or pro-choice, and all that she could say that she was personally pro-life, but would not say if she would support codifying Roe. He continued to press this point as she obfuscated for 2.5 minutes, and she was just obfuscating and getting angry. Her voice was getting like higher and higher and louder because she doesn't have an answer to this question. She knows if she says no, I would actually pass a national abortion ban, she's not winning an election in New York.
Exactly.
That's not happening. So Joe Biden, what he's got to do when he gets in these moments with Donald Trump, he needs to just push him as hard as he can.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, we're in Milwaukee having this debate, or, whatever. Donald Trump, do you want a national abortion ban?
Which
yes
almost makes me want to just skip right to our next thing now.
Let's do it right now.
Yeah. So it came out that Donald Trump, in his closed door meetings, is pushing for the national abortion ban.
It didn't take long, did it?
Yeah. Which, my God, I wonder who leaked this, because this is one of the worst things I think that could have happened for his campaign.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe it's
this is how he loses.
It is how he loses. Maybe it's early. Like maybe he'll just clog up the media cycle enough so that once it gets closer to the election, it's not that big of a deal. But of course, like you're saying, if Biden is any kind of politician at all, he's just going to press Trump on it as much as he can.
I do know that there is like some strategy where like, you leak a little bit of your policy out and like kind of test the waters with it.
Okay.
Don't make a public announcement, just leak it, see what happens.
Okay.
People do that. Something this divisive, that he would be so stupid to do that.
Well, unless all of the analysis of elections since the overturn
have
of
been
Roe v.
wrong.
Wade is wrong, and that it hasn't just won Democrats seats everywhere across the country.
Yes, but then I get mad when I look at people in the media. People in the media have actually, like on the Sunday shows at Meet the Press, are like, is Donald Trump moderating on abortion by doing a 16-week ban? Because that's in the middle of 0 and 32, and it's like, no. Stop! You're giving him the election victory. Stop it right now.
Yeah,
stop. You're completely lying.
Moderating on the issue is giving it to the states.
Yes, thank you. And that's where Republicans have been forever.
That's where Haley has certainly been. Yeah, it's one of the strongest parts of her campaign.
I want everyone to understand that Republicans lie to you when they say they care about states' rights. They don't care about the states' rights to do anything.
We're going to bring this up in our deep dive.
Yes.
Because I think they used to, but not anymore.
Okay.
I think this is something that Trump has changed.
Oh, I don't think so at all.
I do.
Oh, that's crazy to think about.
Okay.
Really? All right, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But so it's all about power, okay? It's all about which levers of power they can pull to get their agenda across. If it comes from the state, great. If it can come from the federal government, great. They're going to pull whatever lever they want, at least now, okay? So then I want to go into 16-week abortion ban. What does this mean? Well, before the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, only 4% of legal abortions happened at 16 weeks or later. So 4% of abortions would be at all affected in this, okay? Now, the vast majority of these women have abortions due to medical complications. This is coming from the SDC. Now, this is Dr. Maria Isabel Rodriguez. She's the director of the Center for Reproductive Health Equity at Oregon's Health and Science University. She said, the people seeking abortions at 16 weeks, while it's a small number of women, are the people at greatest risk for maternal mortality and morbidity. Now, this is what's so important. Greatest risk, because we talk about this all the time, right? People and Republicans always say they carve out exceptions to the life of the mother.
Yeah.
But what does it mean? Do we need to have 100% certainty that you're going to die before we do this abortion? Mm-hmm. Is that the line we have to take it to? Does the woman have to be bleeding out on the bed before we finally say that an abortion can be had? But even if this abortion bill that Trump wants to pass doesn't includes exceptions, a lot of them don't end up getting used because, like we're saying, doctors don't want to face the significant criminal penalties that come with providing a non-medically sufficient abortion.
Yeah.
So, if the life wasn't actually in danger, or maybe the rape case wasn't totally proven in a court of law. How can a medical provider in that split moment decision know all of these facts?
Yeah.
In order to be safe enough to go through with the abortion?
At the very least, stop making it life of the mother. Get health of the mother as the wording in these laws.
At least, at the minimum, because what Republicans like to say is, oh, European countries have 12-week cutoffs for abortion, and no abortion activists over there are claiming that they live in some oppressive regime. Well, nearly all of these European countries allow abortion on broad grounds beyond 16 weeks, very broad. One of the broad grounds is person's mental health, and in some cases due to social and economic impact of the pregnancy. So if those are the types of things that you're trying to do, you have a deal.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about social and economic impact of pregnancy, person's mental health, fine.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're talking about.
Those are like if you have a reason
Yes.
to want to get an abortion.
That's like if you can give me any reason you want an abortion, you can have the abortion,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That's what that is in the European law system, okay? Republicans are like, you need to prove that you got raped. You need to prove that you've been a victim of incest. With this type of abortion stance, Joe Biden needs to run against this head on.
Yes.
Focus on this. This is how you beat Donald Trump.
And he will.
And he will.
Yes.
This is what he's going to do. This is going to be his track to defeat Donald Trump come November.
It's abortion. It's Republicans can't do anything, including on immigration, which is their biggest issue, right? Those two things they will be his biggest winning issues, I think, which is hilarious because he's created an incredible economy.
Yes.
And supposedly that's what voters care the most about.
Guess not.
No.
Guess that's all irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about immigration right now and the positive effects of it that we are feeling and will be feeling over the next few years.
Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to right now jump to the Ezra Klein piece?
Let's do Ezra
that recently
Klein.
Came out.
Let's do Ezra Klein.
So this happened like last week, and this is now a conversation that's happening in Democratic circles. Ezra Klein put out an episode of his podcast that said, and I think an article came out about it too, that said the Democrats have a better option than Joe Biden for president. In it, he talks about how he thinks Biden has been a good president, a great president. He's made a ton of policy wins. He's created a great economy, which all economists expected not to happen. But that his age is an issue. That poll after poll shows his age is an issue, and that poll after poll shows that he is trailing Donald Trump. I think we both agree that age is Biden's biggest issue.
Age is his biggest issue, easily.
And the truth is, and what Ezra talks about is, like, people try to equivocate the ages of Biden and Trump. Biden is only 3 or 4 years older than Trump. Trump can also easily be categorized as an old man. But when you see them, you see and you hear the clear difference.
It's about the perception. And
exactly.
People just obviously can see that age has not been as kind to Joe Biden as it has been to Donald Trump.
Biden he just is an old man. And the argument that Ezra makes is that he is failing to convince people otherwise.
Yeah.
Right. And so even if he can tell people all these things, even if he can tell people that he's not so strict on abortion as Trump and Republicans are, that he's better at governing and he tries to pass a border bill that the Republicans don't,
that he made a great economy.
It doesn't
matter.
It won't he can't convince them of this fact that his age is not a problem, because they just still see him as being old and his age as being a problem. So what Ezra suggests is, one, convince Joe Biden to stop his campaign for president. And then for the Democrats to pick a nominee for the party at the party's convention, which is a tradition that used to happen for many decades. It hasn't happened for a long time. I think the last time it was in the 60s that a candidate was chosen at the convention. He suggests going back to that, choosing one of many strong Democratic candidates and having them run against Trump as supposedly a better option than Biden. I thought it was well thought out and well articulated, so at least worth us discussing.
Yeah. I mean, he's correct at pointing at the problem, right? The problem is Joe Biden is too old.
Yeah.
That is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my concern with his whole thesis is it a problem that can be solved?
Is there an alternative?
Is there an alternative?
Yeah.
So he says that there is, right?
Yes.
That's his opening thing, right?
Yeah.
There was another option. I don't actually think there is.
He poses several other Democratic like hopefuls or possibilities as people who could replace Biden, who would do better against Trump. And yet the polling I've seen says that all of these potential Democratic nominees do worse than Biden against Trump.
Like Gretchen Whitmer. She is a very popular governor in Michigan. She just won re-election by like over 10 points at least. And it has her down to Trump like 12 points. That's can't be true.
Do we believe exactly?
Right.
Do we believe
Gretchen Whitmer won Michigan by over 10 points. You're going to tell me she's going to lose to Donald Trump nationally by 10? That's not happening, guys.
So
that makes me question the polls generally.
Yeah.
It makes me question the polling. Is it even worth looking at it right now? Is it even worthwhile to even take into account? Should any analysis be done around it? I don't know if it should, to be honest. I'm not convinced that polling for this question should even be taken seriously.
I think I would agree with you more on polling about Biden versus Trump. What about polling just on the perception of Biden's age, though?
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the perception of his age is a number that we can definitely take at face value.
So the question is more whether, like, how much of an effect will that perception of his age have on his chances in the election?
Right.
Which we can't know exactly.
Right. We're not going to know until it happens.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
You don't think it's going to make enough of a difference to, say, have a Gavin Newsom run and do better, or a Whitmer?
Maybe a little better.
Okay.
But then that's Ezra Klein's kind of point, right? Ezra Klein is like, Biden can win, but do we just want him to eke it out, or do we want a Democrat to crush Trump and Trumpism?
Yes.
And so he's making the argument that Gavin Newsom could crush Trump.
Yes.
I don't know if Gavin. That's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, I mean that the conversation does come up of like which particular candidate. I think Newsom might not be the candidate to do so. But what about the viability generally
of an open convention idea?
Yeah,
I vehemently disagree with an open convention idea. First of all, I think it's undemocratic. Okay, I think it's undemocratic for a bunch of unelected party delegates to get into a room and then pick the person that's going to be our president. I think that's messed up. That's not democratic at all. That's why we went away from the convention system, because it was undemocratic.
I want to push back against this instantly, though, because there hasn't been a democratic process.
Why
for the
was
president.
that?
Because
no one ran.
But they didn't run because Biden was the assumed incumbent. And if he drops out of the race, this is going to be the only way to choose a candidate. And I don't think saying no one ran is an argument that it has been a democratic process.
No. I'm not saying that it has been a democratic process. I'm saying that the democratic process, your chance at it's gone. Yeah. And this is where we're at now.
But we don't have to be there.
But the only way to go around that, it seems counterintuitive. You're putting the Democratic Party into a state of chaos.
Yeah.
You're choosing to put the Democratic Party into a position where a bunch of unelected people are picking our president. That's where we're putting the Democratic Party at that point.
Yes.
You have two options. You either go with the guy who wins South Carolina by 96% or whatever, okay? Almost an irrelevant thing. The fact that Joe Biden wins the South Carolina primary is almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that that's better than having unelected people pick your president. Do you think so?
Not necessarily.
I don't know, man. I'm very against the convention style system because it's not conducive to public opinion.
I'm against the convention style versus a primary, but like you said, we missed the chance for a primary. To me, that does not mean that we should just give it to the person who was going to be chosen regardless, who was chosen in lieu of a democratic process.
Okay, can you see how by doing something like this, like a convention, an open convention, the fractions of the Democratic Party that would explode into this?
Yes, well, this is a different
point now, right?
Yes.
So, but first of all, let's close the democracy angle here.
Okay.
I think that any conversation about whether or not Joe Biden is the right candidate is a moot point now. I think bringing it up genuinely
Just weakens him.
There's no reason to do it.
Okay.
It's over. It's done. We already have we already had 2 primaries.
Okay.
Super Tuesday is 2 weeks away. No one has even indicated that they want to. Okay.
Dean Phillips, baby.
Yeah, except for Dean Phillips.
Yeah.
Literally no one has indicated that they'd even be interested in
Yeah.
doing such a thing. And so now we're going to you want to throw the whole Democratic Party up into array and then make everyone scramble to find a president in like a couple weeks after he's just raised a shit ton of money personally. In 1 month, this past month in January, Joe Biden has raised $42 million. You want to burn all that money? I think it's stupid.
Okay. I think those are fair points. Some of them. So some of them are like, but you just grouped a lot together. I think
I gift galloped you.
Yeah. So I think I don't think it weakens Biden because the inception of the point is this Ezra Klein piece, which means anyone who is going to, I mean, maybe it can be misconstrued out there, but Ezra is so clear about Biden being a good president, about him thinking, believing that Biden's mental acuity is there, that he is sharp.
Can you see if this gets picked up by more media figures and the media starts running, Biden should drop out and have an open convention over and over and over and over again. That's just going to weaken him.
Yeah, I suppose it could.
And so that's not worth it. For what? What's actually the benefit here? To gain maybe like 0.5% more? Like what's the actual margin of difference of victory that a Gretchen Whitmer opposes over Joe Biden? Like what is the gain here? That's what we're going to be arguing about.
When we have an electoral college that relies on the swings of a few states.
No, I know that. Yeah.
That are separated by 10,000 votes, 20,000 votes, it might be enough. Like I don't think the argument that like the swing is going to be too little is a valid one because these few voters on the margins are that valuable.
But then all of this really boils down to the concern if Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump, right? If Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Sure.
Whether or not, 98% of America could say Joe Biden's too old, but if that same poll had Joe Biden plus 10, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So that means that we're taking a lot of stock in the poll numbers of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump when we just saw the Democrats vastly overperform the 2022 midterms in amazing ways, okay?
Yeah.
Winning Senate seats, flipping state houses. We saw almost all the special elections that have been going on all go to the Democrat.
Which means if the polls are not reliable, then we are going off of literally nothing this risk of destabilizing the party.
And we're only attacking the incumbent for nothing.
Yeah.
If we look back at the polls of 2022, they thought Dr. Oz was going to win Pennsylvania by 2, John Fetterman won by 5. They thought God damn it, who ran against Warnock? Walker or something? Not Walker. Whatever.
Yeah.
Warnock's opponent was going to win by 2. Warnock won by 1.
Yeah.
Michigan, Tudor Dixon was going to run tied with Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer won by 10.
Yeah.
So we're putting all this stock in the polls, trying to throw the whole party over the boat when we might be fine.
We just have no real reason to think to believe the polls.
Right.
Historically, the evidence is,
I have zero reason to believe the polls after what we've seen in these last two, the special elections, the midterm elections. I have no reason to believe the polls right now.
There's one other, so we kind of glossed over how this could divide the party as well.
Yes.
Like if this goes to convention, then you brought up when we talked off camera about how you're going to have Palestinian protesters there making a huge fuss, and the animosity within the party is going to be super visible on display. They are not going to be able to coalesce around a candidate.
I think it's 1968 part 2.
Yeah.
In 1968 was when the Democratic Party nominated Hubert Humphrey, even though Eugene McCarthy had won the majority of primaries across the country. Eugene McCarthy was an anti-Vietnam candidate. Hubert Humphrey was the pro-Vietnam War candidate. 1968 blows up into, anti-war protests of people, holding up the Viet Cong flag. And you imagine that's exactly what's going to happen if we do an open convention style in this one coming up.
Okay.
I can already picture all the progressive and leftist movements coalescing on that city.
Can I tell another version of the story?
Yes.
And I want to hear your response to it. A version where they go into the convention and every politician there who wants to run puts forward their best foot, makes some inspiring speech about why they're the person to lead the party. They give props to all of the other candidates there. They give props to Biden to try to keep everything coalesced. Afterwards, the media is completely abuzz, and people are extremely excited about how they don't have to choose between the Biden-Trump rematch again. They actually get something to think about, that it feels like they're able to express a little bit more of a choice. Now, is that a story that could happen in your head?
Our stories happen at the exact same time. Because when all the people are in the convention giving those very nice speeches, all the cameras are pointed out the window looking at the people banging on the doors.
I think you're giving the media a little bit too much of a bad rap.
It's what happened in 68. No one watched the speeches at the convention in 68. They just watched the police club people in the head.
Okay, 68 was 60 years ago. And it'll be a crazy historic moment for the party to have gone back to a convention and to see these politicians actually competing head to head in this super charged, intense moment where this speech might determine who they choose, who is our next president. I think the cameras are very much going to be on the politicians when that is the case. And of course, they will also film the people banging on the windows. There will be clips of that circulating. That will be reported as well. But this will be an absolute revelation as far as like not a new way that things are being done, but a completely unorthodox one in today's day and age.
Yeah, but I don't know. Okay. I don't know. I am not convinced. So much of the election is done in the next few months, right? The next few months is where the war chest gets developed, the candidate raises a ton of money, and then they're able to spend it all right before.
Yeah.
We're going to waste all that time until the summer, 3 months before the election, and then try to sprint our way to the finish line after the other guy's been running a marathon the whole time?
Yeah.
It just seems like a bad strategy.
Yeah, that's fair. And because he is all, like, even now and for the past several months, he's been laying the groundwork.
Yes.
Like,
buying the ads.
Yeah.
He's bought hundreds of millions. He bought over $100 million in ads at a discount for the next couple months.
Yes. He got the endorsement from the UAW. He's been like, the messaging about the economy has been hammering home. Yeah,
the UAW endorsement and everything. Obviously, the UAW would probably endorse the next Democratic candidate anyway. Yes. But the point is, like, I don't know, man. I don't think there's a good because again, all of this is operating on the assumption that Joe Biden is down.
Yes.
And I'm not convinced there has not been an election that has gone to the Republicans since 2016. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Republicans have lost every single election since 2016. I'm just honestly not worried.
Okay. No, I think I'm good leaving it there. Yeah. I think it was a great discussion.
That was really good.
Yeah, worthwhile to have.
Now, I want to go back into... All right, let's talk about immigration. So, immigration is going to save America. Now, that's already going to cause a bunch of hate comments. That's already going to have a bunch of people hating on us in the comments. But it's important to recognize, okay? If we only look at U.S. population growth due to natural change, this is births minus deaths, our population growth in 2024 would only be 0.7. That would be our population growth.
Which means it's shrinking,
yes,
right? Like one is staying even.
No, 2 is staying even.
Okay. You're talking about average births per woman then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, no. 1 is correct. Yes.
Okay.
This is not births per woman. You're right.
Okay.
So, yes, because 1 on this chart would be 2. Do you know what I mean by that? Forget it. Doesn't matter.
1 is maintaining.
Yes, which would be 2 would be maintaining 2 births per woman.
Okay.
So 0.7 would be our, we'd steadily be declining with our population.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of immigration, we are gaining 2 million people. I'm sorry, 1.2 million people in 2024 due to immigration. Only 0.7 due to births.
So 700,000 based on births minus deaths. Okay.
Yes. Okay. 700,000 births.
Wait.
No. Oh, can we start this fucking clip over?
Okay.
Fuck. All right. God damn it.
I looked at this chart, dude. I don't understand it.
Oh, now I get it. It's saying that 0.7 births minus deaths, the population would still grow, but only by 700,000.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Now I get it.
So our okay.
Fuck me. All right.
Are you sure about that, though?
Positive. It says millions on the left. Components of U.S. population net change.
Yeah.
Millions on the left. Gray is natural change, births minus deaths.
No, okay. That's what I thought as well. But to me, as long as the U.S. population continuing to grow in 2033, to me is a sign that is not immigration is going to save us. Maybe was that the title of the article?
No, but it definitely is.
Dude,
it is. That's not sustainable for Social Security at all.
No, maybe not. Okay, is that going to be your argument here?
That's one of them.
Okay, I'm just saying, compared to all of our competitor countries, the fact that we still will have a growing population in 2033,
very different.
We are so far ahead of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't say immigration will save us.
No, I mean you can. It's whatever.
Okay. I'm just saying immigration is good for America. Is that not? What do you want me to say?
That's almost too broad, right? I don't know. No, I mean I'm
saying immigration will save us.
Okay.
Okay. So now I want to talk about how immigration will save the United States. That's very hyperbolic. There's going to be a lot of comments down below saying that, I'm terrible and we're evil people, but whatever.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how immigration is going to keep us not only competitive on the international stage, but improve our economy, strengthen our social safety net, and overall make us a more vibrant society, right? So in 2024, our population growth would only be 700,000 people if we just took our natural change. This is births minus deaths, only 700,000. Because of immigration, we will be gaining another 1.2 million people in 2024. This 1.2 million growth because of immigration will stay at is expected to stay at 1.2 for the next decade, while our population from natural change, births minus deaths, will continue to decrease.
I'm just imagining someone who's anti-immigration watching this is you're describing my nightmare.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to tell you why that's actually a good thing. You should get over it, okay? Because what's your reasoning? We'll get over whatever. We'll talk about it, okay?
Yeah.
So without all of this, okay? Without all this immigration, we could be on the path of a Germany's demographic picture.
Totally.
We could be going down that path if we don't absorb these immigrants that can make our economy strong, increase our consumer spending, and secure our social safety net. Now, how is all that possible? Well, the CBO assumes that the surge in immigration that began in 2022 will continue to grow throughout 2026 and then eventually subside. Okay. Now, because of all this immigration growth, the Congressional Budget Office, that's the CBO, is projected to boost the growth rate of the GDP by an average of 0.2 percentage points a year. That is 2 percentage points larger in 2034 than it would be otherwise. This makes our economy $7 trillion larger than it would have been otherwise.
That's crazy.
That's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Now, this is like the devil's advocate here. Real GDP per person will be 0.8% smaller in 2034 because of the increase in immigration. But this burden of a decrease of GDP per capita will be felt by the incoming migrants.
Which of course makes sense.
Course makes sense.
Because they're going to be the, I don't know if least productive?
Least productive is the right word.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to be the least productive. They're going to be on the lowest end of the value chain of production, right? So this per capita decline will be most felt by immigrants and not by the native-born population, because native-born workers are actually going to end up climbing the ranks of industries way faster as the immigrants start taking the lower-skilled jobs, right? And so now, obviously, we recognize that this isn't going to be possible for every worker, right? Not everyone can become a manager. That's not going to happen. But positive wage growth will return in real terms by 2027. So even if, all worst case scenario, you don't get promoted, your pay actually increases after 2027 due to all this immigration, because the increased demand that the immigrants are spurring in the economy.
Are you saying that initially the wages of native-born Americans will drop?
Native-born low skill will drop.
Really?
That's what the CBO is projecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of challenges my understanding.
No, it doesn't challenge Borjas' understanding. Remember when we were doing the immigration deep dive and the economist Borjas said that like if there were to be any negative wage effects, it would be felt at the lowest end of the economic spectrum?
Yes, but I wouldn't have expected there to be any negative wage effects.
Oh,
That's
well,
my point.
No. I knew. Yeah, there are some negative wage effects for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that was when you didn't. That was like our whole thing.
No. The whole thing is that the immigrant workers don't compete with the native-born workers because they take different jobs.
But that's not what Borjas found at all. Borjas found like for the small percentage of Americans that don't have a high school diploma, their wages get negatively impacted.
Borjas also is in the minority of the economists in this debate. Most economists find that they just don't compete for the same jobs.
I don't know if that's true that Borjas is in the minority of the debate.
I'm pretty sure that that's what I remember researching. I haven't looked back into like the specifics of the debate in a while.
Yeah.
But they take farm jobs. They take construction jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They take like the jobs that I think about them taking are where all of the labor shortages are.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what Jerome Powell actually says specifically. Like immigration is extremely good for the economy because they're going into these sectors that current American workers aren't filling. Right. Yeah. But now that could also decrease the average wage growth, obviously, because if we have a bunch of like the aggregate can only tell you so much.
Sure.
If a bunch of now low skilled jobs get added into the economy, average wages go down. Does that mean your wage specifically goes down?
Exactly.
No.
That's my question.
But the average wage gets pulled down in the aggregate.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Yes. But but that's an argument or a conversation for another day with that.
Yeah. Well, I just think that's extremely important to communicate because like that's a super powerful argument. Like that's why Bernie Sanders used to be anti-immigration.
Yeah.
Super powerful argument against immigration and one that needs to be heeded.
Right. The distribution of these immigrants across the country are going to be different depending on where you live. By 2020, I think by 2034, 27% of California will be foreign born. 22% of Florida will be foreign born. 23% of New York. 70% of Texas. Now, what I think is interesting here is so far, this is not the highest amount of foreign-born population the U.S. has had in its history.
Really?
No, the highest is still back in the 1910s.
Okay.
Even if we go back to this, right, the highest is still going to be after the Italian immigration wave, after the Irish immigration wave, though that age is still the highest point in American immigration.
Okay.
But now what makes this so good is that all of these immigrants are going to create or are going to fill the labor shortages that exist in our economy. Take the lower value added jobs then higher added value jobs can come back to the American worker, be created for them. And because our population is going to continue to grow at a rapid pace, we are going to be able to fully fund our retirement plans way more effectively than any other country in the G7.
Okay.
Because we have more workers that are going to be in their prime of life as the Gen Xers and eventually millennials retire, because that's going to happen, we will be able to fund Social Security no issues if we do what we said we need to do last episode.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a whole other topic. But point is, immigration is beneficial for all of this. Again, these immigrants don't receive Social Security benefits. An immigrant only receives Social Security benefits for the child that they have in the United States who's a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
That's the only one who receives any type of disability or welfare payments or food stamps or anything like that.
Yeah.
So the fact that the economy is going to grow $7 trillion because of this increase in immigration, this is something that politicians need to be out there saying more frequently.
Yeah.
This is a massive positive. They need to be selling how immigration is a good thing. They don't always need to be on the defensive of the immigration topic. They should be embracing it in a lot of ways, and then embracing it and then moving towards a good immigration system that increases the number of legal immigrants. That's what they need to be pushing with.
Yeah, of legal immigrants. I thought about this a bit this week. The problem is you can't be okay with illegal immigration. You can't have a political platform that's like, let's bring in more illegal immigrants.
No, because nobody wants that. No one's like pro illegal immigration. That's not going to happen.
But because they've won this current iteration of setting the conversation, the anti-immigration folk have, we need to address that first. Like anything that we try to do to increase and better the legal immigration system is going to be countered with you have to handle illegal immigration
But then
first.
I almost disagree with you, because asylum seekers aren't illegal, but they call them illegal anyway. Right? Asylum seekers literally are not illegal.
Yes.
They've acclaimed asylum.
Yes.
That's not illegal, but they call them illegal anyway.
Fair.
Like, I feel like they'll call anyone illegal.
Uh,
I don't think they're
don't
literally
know.
calling people that aren't illegal right now.
well, yes, but I think asylum seekers are different than asylum receivers. As far as like who you can argue is illegal versus not.
Not really. If you're claimed for asylum, you're not illegal.
Technically,
Well, yeah.
but especially given the fact that we know most people seeking asylum aren't granted asylum, that we know that, or at least it's widely reported, that asylum seekers come here knowing that they'll be released into the country while they wait their trials. Like that's much easier to argue against than they went through the whole system. They were granted asylum by the court, and now they're here legally.
I want to give more insight into the growth of the American economy and kind of how it's been growing so well. One of the interesting things to come out of 2023 is that the American worker has gotten way more productive. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, productivity increased 2.7% in 2023. Over the last 2 quarters, it has been growing at more than double the rate from 2005 to 2019.
That's nuts.
Yeah. One of the reasons that so what is productivity before we go into this? It's the total amount of output of an economy, total amount that an economy produces divided by hours worked in the economy, right? So how much production does 1 hour equal?
Yeah. How much GDP can you squeeze out of an hour?
Yeah. And what they're talking about is that the integration of advanced technology into the production of goods and provision of services is currently paying dividends. And what I like about this is they even said how generative AI and the uses of like ChatGPT and Gemini and all the other, chatbot coding assistant softwares aren't really integrated in corporate America yet. They aren't really there where everyone is using them. And so once it does, this 2.7% could like hit the fucking ceiling.
Hopefully it doesn't also drive unemployment up.
Right. Which is that's the give and take here.
Yeah.
But if we can get productivity up like that, that would just be fucking awesome.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And so this gains in productivity means that businesses can make more money per hour, which means they can reinvest in operations and theoretically pay workers more. Now that's the key word there. Theoretically.
Yeah.
Okay, because in the past, we have not been giving these benefits of worker productivity increases to the workers. From 1979 to 2022, productivity grew by more than 4 times the inflation-adjusted 14.8% growth in compensation for average American workers.
Yeah.
So, productivity goes like this, wages go like this. You're not.
Yeah.
It's just they're not keeping up.
And of course you'll never expect them to exactly keep up.
Yeah.
But what you're hoping is productivity is like this and wages are still like this.
Yeah, you still want like some increase that's like close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But honestly, let's be honest, if it was equivalent,
It'd be bad.
then there would never be an incentive for like people who run companies to innovate and to produce more.
There'd also be no money to reinvest at all. Right?
Yeah.
If all the productivity increases only went to wages, then there would really be no money for businesses to grow and expand. So we don't want them to be equal, right?
Okay.
That's actually not a good situation.
Okay.
Right? Because then a company can't be agile, it can't expand.
Sure.
Really. But right now, we're actually doing a pretty good job with wages being kept up with productivity for the first time in a very long time. It's not perfect, right? But real wage gains are sitting at 1.4% compared to the 2.7% rise in productivity.
Do you know over what time period that is?
That is from the 1.4% is last year.
So 2023.
Yes, 2023, and the 2.7% is also 2023.
Okay.
And I made sure to say real wage gains and not nominal wage gains because productivity is technically inflation adjusted because it uses real GDP divided by hours.
Okay.
So I wanted to use real wages, not nominal wages. That means inflation adjusted wage growth. So we're looking pretty good. I think like half of productivity going to wage increases. It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
I would like it to be a little closer, but like I'm just going off that base of speculation, right? I don't really know what the perfect number is.
Exactly. I mean, just relative to the past,
Right.
it is good.
Right.
So
'Cause
let's just say it's good.
relative to the past, that 1.4% number should actually be 0.7, right?
Yeah.
If it's
So it's double
what it normally
has been over the past 40 years.
That's a significant improvement.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is going to be coming, like we always say, it's coming from the bottom end of the economic spectrum. The bottom 10% of wage makers are seeing the most amount of wage increases. This is a workers' economy right now that we're living in, which is different from what we've been seeing the last 40 years.
I mean, and these are direct results of the union organizing activity that just skyrocketed in 2023.
Absolutely.
So the more of that we get, the better of an economy that we get.
Yes. And a lot of officials suggest that the growth of this productivity was actually the reason that the Federal Reserve and the federal government was able to produce the soft landing that we got. They say that even though borrowing became more and more expensive, because workers were creating more value faster, companies did not actually feel that intense pressure and credit limitations because they were actually making more money per hour. So they didn't feel the credit pressure. That's what the author of this article was suggesting. But
I think that makes sense.
they just had less credit concerns because they were making more money per hour.
Yeah. And I guess I'm thinking about that on the supply side, right?
Sure.
Like you're just able to make enough stuff so that there's still the same amount of money is sloshing around the economy.
Yeah. Just really cool stuff. I love seeing productivity increase this fast. If we can keep this up and the generative AI things, and then this wage level stays the same. I mean, this is just.
And again, unemployment. Like anytime we mention generative AI, we have to mention
unemployment is scary.
Yeah, we either need an employment guarantee or we need a distributive system that is so good that it doesn't matter that we have high unemployment.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So what's our next topic? Oh,
China's
economy. Okay. So we've been talking about China's economy pretty much every show.
Yeah.
For like the last what episode is this?
36.
Yeah. So for the last 36 weeks, we've talked about China's economy on our show, and we've been talking a lot about their real estate crisis. We've been talking a lot about their deflationary spiral because prices are decreasing. Companies are making less money in profit, which means wages are suffering. Consumption is down. All these things are adding up to a bit of a nightmare. Exports to the United States are down.
Youth unemployment is up.
Yeah. There's a lot of bad things going on in the Chinese economy. And we're here to give you another bad thing going on in the Chinese economy. We want to talk about foreign direct investments that are going into China.
Yeah.
China basically grew through foreign direct investment. In the early 2000s, very specifically after 2005, foreign direct investment just shot up to the roof and basically grew the Chinese economy. The West built China. The United States, Europe, our companies totally built the country up into what it is today, the manufacturing powerhouse. Well, the economy only recorded $33 billion of investments abroad from 2023. Well, what does that mean? $33 billion sounds like a lot of money to me. Let's put that number in perspective. This was an 82% decline from the previous year.
That's crazy.
The previous year, it was $330 billion?
Yeah.
Declines down to $33 billion. This is the lowest annual figure since 1993. This screams that the international markets and international capital has no trust in China for the future.
All I'm seeing in this chart is decoupling.
Decoupling.
That is the one word that is coming out of it.
Yes, America and Europe are not Europe because we'll get into that, but America is no longer playing.
Europe is probably on their heels, but not yet.
Well, I'll say this now because we talked about it. The German companies have actually reached $13 billion of investments, which is the highest Germany has ever invested in China.
Yeah. And we've talked about, we did a deep dive into the German economy. We talked about so Germany is a heavy manufacturing economy, right? It's obviously known for its cars, but also its chemicals industry is huge. Both like heavy manufacturing industries takes a lot of energy. They've been dealing with an energy pricing crisis because of cutting off Russian natural gas since their invasion of Ukraine. And they haven't really been able to subsidize these companies well enough to make it worth their while to stay in Germany and do the manufacturing there. So where do these companies want to go? China.
So China is coming off the Lunar New Year, and this is a big deal in China. Everyone gets like 2 weeks off. So economic activity pretty much slows down. Governmental activity pretty much goes to zero, and everyone just kind of spends time with their family. Wish we had something like that, where we just get 2 weeks where you just like do nothing.
Do you not get any time at Christmas? Do you not get the week?
No, I don't get the week.
I get the week.
Damn, bro.
Yeah.
Damn, gotta use my PTO for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chinese officials are pushing for the idea that they need to increase investor confidence, right? They need to prove to investors that China is a safe place to put their money. Now, this is big, and China made a big presence at Davos this year, right? Yeah. China was very, very present at Davos, talking to these capitalists and trying to convince them that China is a safe place to invest, that we are the economy of the future. When China came to San Francisco, they met with a bunch of business leaders. They were selling access to Xi for like 40 grand.
Yep.
Which like isn't actually that much. Like if I were to think about like talking to a world leader and like getting in his ear, didn't think it would only cost me 40 grand to sit next to Xi at a dinner party.
I actually just read an article that was talking about Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign, and he had a fundraiser that was 50 grand.
Wow, back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And so that's just a candidate. Like Xi is arguably the second most powerful person in the world.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So again, China's trying to build up this confidence. Well, it's getting more and more difficult because not only is the Chinese economy in a slump, but China is pressuring foreign companies when they do get into China to follow the CCP party line.
Yeah.
One example we gave was this consultants agency that was doing research on the Chinese economy. And they basically like totally stopped their operation because they didn't want the research that these guys were doing to get out into the public, right? Because they didn't want to hurt, either their stock market, which is currently, not doing great, or hurt foreign direct investment. Obviously couldn't stop that. But, they've been punishing these companies. You have an example too, right?
Yeah. Well, there's an article that just came out like today out of the Financial Times that was crazy to me, that China is reviving Mao-era militias in state-owned enterprises. So China's state-owned enterprises have begun setting up in-house reserve military units, a legacy of the Mao era, in a sign of authorities' increasing concern about social and political instability amid the country's economic slowdown.
Wow.
The departments were historically groups affiliated with the People's Liberation Army's recruitment efforts at the county and village level under Mao, and today they typically conduct civil defense activities and contribute to military recruitment, promotion, and training. But experts say the formation of these corporate units reflect concerns from Xi Jinping about domestic stability rather than projecting international strength or building up their military capacity.
Oh, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, so like talk about Western companies that might be worried about too much regulation, right? He's literally installing military units inside companies to make sure they follow they toe the CCP line.
I will say these are state-owned enterprises that are setting up in-house reserve military units, right? So they're state-owned, but the fact that this is happening is not going to be conducive to a business environment.
Correct. There are occasional examples of private-owned. These are almost entirely state-owned where it's happening.
Okay,
but I don't know. It's also a symbol it's a signal that she is extremely worried about the social unrest.
That's like the biggest part of this, right? It's also like how he's choosing to handle the crisis. He's not choosing to handle the crisis through better economic management.
Yeah.
He's not trying to do it through stimulus packages, though. Like he's trying to do it through installing military units at companies.
Yeah. Well, I wonder. I don't want to bulldoze you if you have more, but like I wonder if he's worried about the debt crunch for China, and he's like. He's getting nervous about trying to infuse more money into the economy. The advice that I've seen from many articles is that they need an infusion of cash on the consumer side, on the demand side. For so long, Xi's economic policies have focused on boosting supply, boosting manufacturing and production, but now his own people not only they can't buy anything, and they also are scared to try to buy anything. They feel like they need to just hold on to all their savings. My worry with this kind of thing happening, with these military units going into these state-owned enterprises, this feels like how you start a revolution, man. Like, this is how you radicalize people.
Yes.
Right? Like, by trying to squeeze them harder. This is when the dictator gets more and more fearful and feels like they have to shut down more and more of their freedoms.
Yes.
That's when people start doing crazier things to get those freedoms.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is building out this militia unit thing. This is how you create like this dual aspect of society where like these military reserve units now feel some like direct loyalty to the state above the people themselves.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into some crazy shit.
Yeah.
So this is not cohesive for a good society at all.
No,
This is no way to run a country. This is terrible.
No, I mean, I expect it to I expect the social situation to decline. Like I mean, we know the economy is declining. The foreign direct investment is going to keep being withdrawn. As countries, as the U.S. and I think Europe will follow soon, start to institute more protectionist policies against cheap Chinese goods, the demand that they're getting from elsewhere is going to shrink as well. Like, to me, it looks like a joint economic and social spiral that's just going to get to a very bad place.
The truth is they need to boost domestic demand. Yeah. I don't think that they have the infrastructure to do that. I don't think they have the infrastructure that the U.S. has to just send out stimulus checks to everybody. I don't think they have the same capabilities.
No.
So it's going to be just a whole different, it's going to be a whole nightmare. But the Chinese economy continues to, you know, struggle, and we'll keep you updated as things go on there. But it's crazy to me.
Yeah, it is crazy.
You know what else is crazy? The fact that we are talking about a government shutdown again. This is the one thing that we talk about.
V4, V5?
I think this might be V5. Maybe?
That is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, also, we're talking about a budget for 2024. This budget, we're almost at the point.
Wait,
it's been almost half a year.
Oh, yes.
Right?
So,
since the budget was supposed to happen. Yeah.
Biden is going to reveal his 2025 budget in a month. So, like, if things don't, yeah. So, like, if things don't work out in like the next couple weeks here, we're going to be arguing about the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget at the same time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. Let's just do a quick summary, okay? Kevin McCarthy, no, I can't go all the way back. I know I can't go all the way back. I'm not going all the way. If you haven't kept up already, then you've been living under a rock. If you don't care enough, click off the video. Okay, I don't care.
Yeah. Go look up one of our other videos about the government shutdown.
Yes.
Watch it. Get caught up.
We should make a playlist of all of them. Yeah. We should make a playlist of all the government shutdown
videos.
videos.
15 videos.
Yeah. It's like all of them. Just all of them are the government shutdown videos. That's so funny. Okay, so Mike Johnson recently passed a CR, continuing resolution, that keeps the 2023 budget going and going until appropriators can come to an agreement on, you know, the 2024 new budget. All right.
Deja vu.
The deadline is March 1st. We are 10 days from a government shutdown.
So what happens?
I fucking hate this life, dude.
I wonder if what's going to happen is another continuing resolution.
I wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah, where the far-right Republicans get mad at Johnson and start talking again about removing him from the seat.
God, I'm in Groundhog Day with these people, dude. It's like not a serious political party anymore.
No, it's not.
Republicans are expecting, at least that they're going into it with this mindset now, okay? Republicans are expecting they have to rely on Democrat votes. So thank God they're going into it with that.
Yeah. The previous 3 times they went in under the pretense that they were going to pass it fully along Republican lines. And now at least they know that they're going to need Democratic help up front rather than just coming to that conclusion at the end of the process.
Yeah, so thank God he's at least going into that, right?
Yeah.
But he needs to do a procedural gambit to do this. He needs to do something called a suspension of the rules, which requires 2/3 of the House to pass the bill instead of just a simple majority.
Okay.
I think Kevin McCarthy did something like this before to get the other one done. So now we're just going to wait, and we'll see if this happens. So far-right Republicans are trying to insert riders into these budget deals, right? So they're trying to, like, impose limitations on government agencies. They're going to do stuff. They're trying to limit agencies and how they can do the border, limit agencies on how they can do abortion access, and a whole bunch of other stuff. They're going to try their best, and they're going to fail.
Yep.
And, you know, Republicans will look like clowns, and then the Democrats will help the Republicans learn how to govern, and then we'll see if Mike Johnson can survive that. Right? I mean, that's going to be the big thing. Again, yes. We'll see. I mean, it just goes to show you that the Republican Party literally can't govern, and it's just a nightmare. And what's so funny about this is how we started off the segment here, but the Biden administration is going to be proposing its 2025 budget on March 15th. So if this thing doesn't work out, now we're going to be arguing about two budgets at the exact same time.
Yep.
Which is just, I think it'll be the first time it's happened in our nation's history.
Really?
I don't know of another time. And I also know that government funding didn't used to be this big of a hubbubaloo before the Obama administration like this. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm excited about with with Biden's budget is that we're going to see the campaign that Joe Biden is going to run with that budget bill.
Okay.
Right. This budget bill is what Joe Biden will be running the campaign on. It's where he's going to define his priorities of 2025.
Interesting.
Like that, it's going to show what he wants his second term to be.
Okay. At least as far as like the positive of his campaign.
Yes.
The part of his campaign that isn't built around attacking Trump, attacking Republicans.
Exactly.
This budget is going to represent that.
The budget is going to represent the governmental outlook that he's going to want the policy outlook he's going to try to implement.
It's like, what is he going to do versus what is he going to prevent his opposition from doing?
Exactly. And when it comes out, we'll review it. That'll be super exciting. But government shutdown, March 1st. Let's pray we get through that.
Let's run it back, baby.
Run it back. All right. And last current event for the day is probably the most underwhelming.
Yeah.
Nikki Haley is still in the presidential race. The Republican primary is not technically over yet. So Donald Trump and Nikki Haley have their what is really Nikki Haley's last stand in South Carolina in 4 days on Saturday, February, whatever it is. I don't know. Trump currently has a massive polling lead, 63%. To Nikki Haley's 33%, a 30-point lead. At one point, Nikki Haley got that lead down to like 25, 20 by some polls, but the aggregate has Trump with a 30-point lead. Nikki Haley did a little bit of political maneuvering here that I thought was actually very impressive, and I just wanted to give it a shout out here. She gave a speech today in South Carolina reaffirming that she was in this race to win it, and she will not be dropping out even after South Carolina.
Okay.
She's not dropping out. Behind the scenes, she actually played a lot of tricky little political games that I thought were really cool. She told members of her staff that she actually was going to drop out today.
Okay.
And so these staff members actually then went and leaked it to the media so that all the major news networks were covering her speech. She was on Fox Primetime. She was on all these things. So the whole nation was watching her, right? Damn. So the speech got covered. And then she said flat out, she's like, I know a lot of you media guys were here expecting me to drop out of the race, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
So allegedly, right, she told a select few of staffers that she could catch those who are most likely to leak. And then went after him, which is pretty cool.
It's kind of like you can only pull that out of your bag once.
Yes.
But I guess now is kind of the time for her.
Yeah, I mean, this is her do or die.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you ever, you watch Game of Thrones, we're big fans, but like it's like Tyrion Lannister moves, right? Yeah. Super cool. Now, can Haley win South Carolina? Not really. But
no.
No, she can't. But the only two, if she is to win South Carolina, she's got to do well in Columbia. She's got to do well in Charleston. These are the two areas that she has to do well in. These are counties that these are cities in counties that Marco Rubio won back in the 2016 primary. That's going to be your base. That's where she's going to win. I think her county in the Northeast is another big population center, and her county, if she can convince some Democrats to come out and vote for her, that could help her.
Yeah.
But
she's gonna lose.
And she's gonna lose big, and it's gonna be funny.
Yeah.
And it's good for Democrats because the Trump administration, the Trump campaign cannot cooperate with the Republican Party to do joint fundraisers while there is a primary still going on. Okay. So the Biden administration has the ability to do joint fundraisers with the party. It's one of the reasons he's able to rake in so much cash. Trump can't do joint fundraisers with the party. Okay. You can't do joint committee fundraisers until Donald Trump has secured the majority of delegates to win the nomination. He cannot do that until March 19th. It is not mathematically possible until March 19th. So joint fundraising committees are totally off the table for the Trump campaign until at least March 19th. Because of Nikki Haley staying in. So that's good. It's buying Biden some time. He has another month to rake in a shit ton of cash. And, we were just talking about that Trump is actually, kind of rough for cash. The Biden administration raked in $42 million this past month. And what was the thing you just read? Like 200,000. Trump has 200,000 less donors.
Fewer donors than he did at this point of the 2020 campaign.
Yeah. That's some pretty substantial numbers.
Apparently, though, Biden still has fewer donors.
Oh, really?
Overall. Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
It's like he has like 70,000 fewer donors.
Oh.
Which is still, Biden has many more than he did at this point of his 2020 campaign.
Right, but still less than Trump.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, well, we'll see what happens in South Carolina on Saturday, and then, we'll probably talk about it briefly on the next show.
Yes. Sounds good.
Are you ready?
Time to dive deep.
Deep dive time, everybody. We are so excited to talk about this
Yes.
one.
So we mentioned this on the last episode. I forgot what precipitated it.
We were talking about if the Republican and Democrat members of the Senate could come together to try to remove the cap on Social Security taxes with Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance.
Yes. And we talked about how Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance have worked with populist Democratic senators before on other types of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made us think about, okay, if they're able to cooperate on these economic issues, on these issues of regulating big banks, big businesses, and the really wealthy, maybe the political coalitions generally that are aligned with the Democrats and Republicans are changing. And maybe the issues that are aligned with those two parties and where they stand on them is also shifting a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to get into that and see how it might change voting dynamics, how it might change who certain demographics are more likely to align with, and how it might define elections moving forward.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And so we want to begin right at around the time of the Civil War and post-Civil War. That's why we kind of want to start this story.
Okay.
Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we want to focus on is kind of seeing how the black vote has moved over time, how working people have voted over time, how immigrants have voted over time, all these different interest groups, which parties have they aligned to, right?
Yeah.
So, with the ending of the Civil War, right, Union comes out on top, and with Reconstruction going on in the South, African Americans see a huge and fast rise of political rights they never experienced before. And it makes them all Republicans because Lincoln is the one who freed them. And
The great emancipator.
the great emancipator. So now all these African Americans are thinking the Republican Party is my party.
Yep.
And they're going to be loyal to this party for a long time. And so the party system that we're talking about here is called the third party system. This is between 1856 and 1896. This is the point we're at right now. And so the Democrat Party at this time has, implemented like Jim Crow rules, literacy tests, poll taxes, anything that they can to go after the African American community vote. How do they get the power to do that? Well, it all comes in 1877 with the end of Reconstruction. With the 1876 elections, there's this huge fight between which elections are true, which electors are true, right? There's this whole fight, which then leads to the passing of the Electoral Count Act. And so the grand bargain that the politicians make at this time is the Republican Hayes says, okay, you let me be president, Democrats, and I will end Reconstruction. I will take all Union soldiers out of the South, and you guys can govern yourselves. It'll be over. And Democrats took that. And so Republicans removed troops from the South, and the Democrats implemented Jim Crow. Now, this decimated the ability for black power to rise. And we're talking about Republicans having sizable minorities or sometimes majorities in states like Louisiana.
Yeah. But, and on the national level at this time, Republicans are dominant, right?
Oh, yeah. That goes without, that's important to mention.
Yeah.
Republicans have every single presidency between 1856 and 1912, except for two, right?
Two terms?
Except for the two terms of Grover Cleveland, who was a Democrat. He wins once in the 1870s and then once in the 1890s.
Okay.
We're going to talk about him because he's actually a very important person.
Okay.
But so at this point, the Republicans are very much like the liberal party. When I say liberal party, I don't mean like the big L FDR style liberal that we know today. I mean more like the English sense of the word liberal, like industrialist, like, you know, free trade. Progressive.
The modernists.
Yes.
I mean, well, if you're on the other side of slavery, right, you're the progressive. You're the, at least socially, the progressive.
Like there was a progressive base inside the Republican Party that's growing. There's a growing progressive base in the Republican Party for sure. But throughout this time of Republican power, they become more and more associated with big business in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
they get very, very deep in big business. A lot of them get bought off for tariff negotiations. A lot of like they put tariffs on industries that are, you know, their friends' industries. So it's this whole situation where they're, it's like the best way to put them is basically laissez-faire, but pretty okay on civil rights for the time, right?
Yes.
That's like the best way to describe their politics, really.
Yeah.
So Grover Cleveland comes into power in the 1870s, and this is the first Democrat to win the presidency since the Civil War. And this is a very, very big deal for a lot of reasons. Grover Cleveland was the governor of New York. And the way he won was he appealed directly to immigrants more than anyone else. He was very, very pro-immigration, but he was pro-immigration in a way that was also anti-corruption, because corrupt officials used immigrants to win elections and basically run cities at this point. They would like get immigrants off the boat, register them for the Democratic Party, get them involved in Tammany Hall. If you know things about 19th century politics, you know about Tammany Hall. And Tammany Hall was like a machine.
Yeah.
And Grover Cleveland took on the Tammany Hall machine as governor of New York. But he was able to get around that and still be pro-immigrant by fighting back against nativist Republicans. And Republicans wanted to implement a literacy test for immigrants. If an immigrant couldn't read, they wanted to send them back. So he pivots himself to be pro-immigrant but anti the corrupt aspect of the immigrant political system at the time.
Interesting.
So Grover Cleveland makes this big anti-corruption case. And his opponent, which I'm so upset I can't remember his name because I wrote so much about this guy, his opponent is a massive corrupt guy.
Okay.
He's like in bed with the railroad industries, writing letters telling the railroads when to buy things, specifically outlining like selling them to these specific companies for favors, like totally corrupt. And this was Grover Cleveland's opponent. So what happens is there are Republicans who don't want to support the Republican nominee because he's corrupt. And these Republicans are called muckrakers. These are the guys who want to clean up the corruption. And they look to Grover Cleveland and they're like, you're not half bad. Grover Cleveland wasn't like some, you know, socialist or anything like that. He had better relationships with working people and the working men's party than the Republicans at this point. But he wasn't like a, you know, we're not at the point where he's like social democrat or something.
Okay, I want to stop on this, focus on this, because this is kind of the dynamic that I think we see happening, that happens throughout this story, is that a portion of the electorate decides that there's another issue that like hasn't necessarily been at the forefront of politics or hasn't been super important in the division between the two parties, that one new candidate takes a stand on, makes their main issue, and then that starts to cause some realignment. They're like, oh, okay, like I actually care more about the thing that this guy is talking about, even though he's not part of the party that I usually vote for. Let's go over to him.
Yes. And so that's what these muckrakers do. And these muckrakers are the precursor to the progressive movement. These are the guys who become the people in the Teddy Roosevelt administration.
Okay.
Who make the Bull Moose Party that we're going to get to in a second. So this is where the lines start getting blurred. And then Grover Cleveland loses re-election. Republicans control for again. And then in 1896, the third party system ends with the nomination of William Jennings Bryan. Now, William Jennings Bryan is a very, very interesting figure. He actually ran for president 3 times. And William Jennings Bryan had very, very pro-populist tendencies. Because one of the things that happened in America in the 19th century is the rise of the populist movement. Now, the populist movement is all about the agrarian revolution and the farmer getting screwed over by a bunch of debtors, right? They're too much in debt. They can't pay their debtors back. currency is too expensive because we're on the gold standard and we can't make our way out of this trouble. We're always in debt. Life sucks. We're poor forever. We can't pay the banks back. And they start, their whole ideology is about taking on the banks and getting rid of this debt.
Okay.
So William Jennings Bryan, he is a big supporter of issuing silver. Now, this is another important part because there's actually a silver party in the United States at this time. That's a single issue party that wants to coin silver, break America from the gold standard, get more currency in circulation so inflation goes up, and then all the debts get pretty much canceled out from the farmers.
Interesting.
So that's what William Jennings Bryan starts running on. And he gives a speech at the Democratic Party convention in 1896 called the Cross of Gold speech. And he decried the gold standard. And he said that you shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. And he is framing all of his politics around this religious fanaticism. He's basically calling, like, if you're religious or, you know, interested in Christianity in any way, he is the guy who's like talking about the Jesus flipping over the table of the money changers, right?
Okay.
And that's how he's framing this. His father was a pastor, so he's always been around this type of public speaking. And now this is when everything starts to switch, and these lower working class voters start seeing the Democratic Party more and more as something that they could actually get behind, that, you know, the Republicans maybe don't have their best interest in mind anymore. Maybe it's actually this new thing.
Okay, so it's
this new populism.
Okay. And this is, so he's more, the populism is still more aligned with the Democrats?
So at this point, the populists become aligned, not the progressives. Progressives and populists are two different things.
Yes.
So the populists are aligned with the progressives. And I'm sorry, the populists are aligned with the Democrats because of him.
Okay.
The populists used to be their own party.
Yes.
But he brought them in.
Into the Democrats.
Into the Democrats.
Okay.
He absorbs the populists.
And so some of these Republicans, again, they take the silver issue and they're like, they can grab me. Basically.
They can grab. Not many Republicans were on the silver issue. It was mostly the populists, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay. So it's just the populists separate and then they become reabsorbed.
Yes.
Okay.
They get reabsorbed into the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Immigrants have been loyal to the Democratic Party and are continue loyal at this point. Now they're like completely loyal to the Democratic Party here. And one thing that's not really totally pulled over yet is the manufacturing worker.
Okay.
The manufacturing worker is not really affected by inflation. He's like, actually, inflation kind of hurts me. He's like, I kind of want my goods to cost more for people to consume.
Yeah.
Because that's the only chances my wages could ever rise. It's actually against my interest for inflation to rise up. I guess I'll stink with Republicans.
Yeah. Well, plus Republicans are still going to be the pro-tariff party at this point, which on manufactured goods.
Yes.
Which is good for the industrial base.
Yes. So the William Jennings Bryan now, he takes over, he takes the populists, brings them in, kind of pushes away the industrialists a little bit, right? And the unions aren't really like, they don't really have that big of a sway. Like most unions are pro-Republican at this point, but not like pro-Republican. They're like lesser of two evils Republican, right?
Yeah.
And then, but what's noticeable about this is William McKinley, who's running against William Jennings Bryan, frames William Jennings Bryan as a huge anti-Semite because William Jennings Bryan, as attacking a bunch of banks, collects this massive group of religious Christian fanatics that are anti-Jew.
Okay.
And they believe that the Jews are the problem with the big banks and that the Jews are making the golden cross that is crucifying mankind.
Okay. And Jennings Bryan does nothing to dissuade those ideas.
I'm not going to get into the hazy history of William Jennings Bryan anti-Semitism. It's totally up for interpretation.
Okay.
I definitely think he was a little bit of an anti-Semite. At least a little bit.
Okay.
At least a little. I'm not really like an expert on him.
Okay, but he almost certainly didn't shut it down.
No,
he didn't do anything to stop it.
No.
Okay.
So this is a good example of, I feel like this is a really good point to like take a little bookmark, a little tab, and note that this is a really interesting way to look at like evangelical base.
Yeah.
Right. This is a really cool. This is a really interesting moment to be like, okay, this is where evangelicals were in 1896.
Yeah, and it like okay, here's a thing to galvanize them by specifically pitting them against a group that was supposedly theologically, ideologically incompatible with their worldview.
Yes. So now we get the rise. So William Jennings Bryan loses in 1896, and now we're in this fourth party system. We have Teddy Roosevelt come to power. Teddy Roosevelt comes in 19 whatever. McKinley gets shot. Roosevelt becomes president, and his big priority is antitrust legislation. He goes after the big trusters, and he busts those trusts up, which is very, very popular. And he is the first really progressive president that we know of. He did not align with McKinley on a lot of things. He actually hated McKinley in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah, but they didn't have the best relationship. But Teddy Roosevelt is able to come in, bust up some trusts. He's doing some conservation programs, and he starts talking about ideas of the government of like national insurance programs. He starts talking about national healthcare insurance, following Otto von Bismarck's program in Germany.
Okay.
He starts because Teddy Roosevelt comes at everything from the mind of war. He wanted an interstate highway system, but because he wanted to bring tanks and not tanks at this point, but like traveling troops across the country faster and faster.
Okay.
Right. So everything is through the minds of wartime. So he's thinking, what would make us more prepped for war than anything? Having a healthy base, making sure that people are happy at home. Right. So these are things that he's thinking about.
Yeah.
But the idea is the progressive movement under Teddy Roosevelt is now thinking about how can government make your life better? He's at least talking about that, which is important. He also makes inroads with the African American community. Some. Now, at this point, the African Americans have been completely loyal to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
To their own disadvantage/advantage. Basically, it's like they have nowhere else to go. You can't vote for the Democrats because the Democrats were the party that kept you in chains, right? Yeah. And you have to vote for the Republicans because they're the ones who set you free, right? Well, Teddy Roosevelt starts trying to make good on that promise. He appoints a lot more African Americans to positions of power and as advisors, despite other Republicans not wanting him to do so. And this is when a split in the Republican Party happens that really blows up. It's the rise of the lily whites.
Yeah.
The lily whites in the Republican Party basically say that we don't want to win national elections with the black vote. We want to win national elections by pulling out some racist white people from the South. That's how we want to win. A little bit of unfair framing on my part, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
They wanted more white Southerners to vote for them than black people.
Yes.
Right.
Totally.
They would have prepared black people just not have voted. Right. So now you're having these two problems. Teddy Roosevelt tries to make good on the lily whites, but then the black people get mad at him. Then he tries to make good on the black people, then the lily whites get mad at him. And he's trying to be in this position where he can't really appease anybody. So in back rooms, especially during election time, Teddy would be very nice and very supportive of the black community. And he would invite them over for dinner and stuff. And Booker T. Washington was a big leader in this, right? And then Booker T. Washington would come home from dinner and then never hear back from Teddy. And he's like, what the fuck? I thought we had a good thing. I thought we were actually making progress. Yeah. But he would just get radio silence. So at a certain point, Teddy flat out refuses to condemn high-profile lynching attacks. Just flat out is refusing to condemn them, and he's not responding to Booker T. Washington's request for comment. He's just not responding. Even at one point in his life, he praises lynchings that take place against Italian Americans, the largest lynching in American history.
Okay, I was going to ask why you think he did this, because obviously securing the black vote at this time would have been super effective, so the clear explanation to me seems to be he was just a racist.
He did have a lot of he was a racist. Teddy Roosevelt was a racist man. Yeah. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. It's just the truth. Yeah. He was literally saying like it would whip the Italians into shape after they got lynched in Louisiana. I mean, it's just it was the guy he was. He was a racist guy. In 1912, the Republican Party splits officially. 1912, huge election. You had 4 major candidates. Not two. Not 3. You had 4 major candidates. You had the Democratic Party under Woodrow Wilson. You had the Republican Party under Howard Taft. You had Teddy Roosevelt as the Bull Moose Party, which is the Progressive Party.
Okay.
And then you had Eugene Victor Debs, the Socialist Party. Ends up getting 7% of the vote nationwide. The best a socialist has ever done in the United States.
Wow.
Millions of votes he got in that election.
Okay.
And so black people are looking at this election and they're like, wait a second. I skipped a step here. I apologize. Roosevelt leaves office in 1908. Taft comes into power in 1908. Taft was a train wreck for the black community.
Okay.
Taft was terrible.
Okay.
Taft was not. Taft actually oversaw an anti-lynching bill get to the floor of the House and did nothing to push it along. Absolutely nothing. He actually fired more black people than Roosevelt did. Okay. So now there's less people involved in government than was under Teddy. And when he was giving a speech in a black church, he refused to condemn the practice of lynching entirely. So black people are looking at Taft and they're like, okay, it can't be worse than this, right? Like, it can't be. So now they're looking for alternatives. So they have Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, Taft, the Republican, Eugene Victor Debs, and Teddy Roosevelt Bull Moose. Some black people are saying a re-election of Teddy Roosevelt would be the worst thing ever. Some black people are saying the re-election of Taft would be the worst thing ever. Some black people are saying that Woodrow Wilson can't be as bad as Taft, right? And then some of them say that they would love to vote for the communist or socialist, and it most aligns with their values, but he has no chance of winning, and we're not going to throw away our vote.
Okay.
Funny how that's happening 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of them actually vote for Woodrow Wilson, which is really, really funny. It's not funny. It's a fucking big mistake, but for them at least. But Woodrow Wilson gets a little bit of the black vote. Not a lot, not a majority, but like, if it goes from like 10% of the black vote to 20% of the black vote.
Okay.
Right? This is enough to give Woodrow Wilson the election, not to mention the split of the Republican Party. And this is the first Southern Democrat to win an election since the Civil War.
Yeah.
This is it. He was born in Virginia. He's a Southern man. He was the president of Princeton, New Jersey, but that's not the point. Point is, now, Woodrow Wilson was still a progressive. But when I say progressive, I don't mean socially progressive. I mean he was for like a more open, transparent, good functioning government involved in the economy, right? He opens up the Fed. He's like pretty good for labor unions.
Okay.
White labor unions. He's pretty good for immigrants, but not good for black people. He officially segregates the federal government. He is the one who segregates the federal government. It was not segregated before this moment. And all the black people who voted for Woodrow Wilson are kicking themselves in the ass. And they're like, what did we do? What did we do? Why would we vote for this guy? He segregated the government. Now, like, it makes it harder and harder for black people to get appointed to positions. So they get basically locked out of the electoral process or the governing process.
Yeah.
But what makes it difficult is there are some economic reforms that actually do good for black people under Woodrow Wilson, because he is doing more government intervention in the economy, which is helping the most impoverished, which does sometimes help black people. So it's like this hard twist, but they don't buy it. They switch back to Republicans. They're like, no, Woodrow Wilson was a mistake. We're voting for Republicans all the time. Okay. So they vote for Harding, I think, and then Coolidge, and then Hoover, and then the Great Depression hits. And the Great Depression changes everything. Yeah. Because at the outset of the Great Depression, the black Democrats are the most impoverished group of people in America. They are hit the hardest. Yeah. Their unemployment rate is like 45 to 50% in 1932. Yeah. And so they're looking, and they're really skeptical to push that button to vote for FDR, because they saw what happened with Woodrow Wilson. They are so skeptical to vote for a Democrat ever again. But Robert Vann, the editor of the Pittsburgh Courier, which is the largest black newspaper in the country, gets in contact with the nail stylist of the wife of a Democratic Party leader. And through this connection, Robert Vann and this Democratic Party leader in Pennsylvania conspire a way to get more black people voting for Democrats. Now, FDR didn't have a lot of cash going into the election. And he was like, I'm not wasting $1 on the black vote. He's like, at this point, honestly, the way the Republicans won the black vote was buying votes. They would basically give a lot of money to black communities, and then the black people would vote for them. Okay. That's really how the Republicans really kept it together. Okay. So the Democrats were like, we just don't have the money. The FDR was like, I literally do not have the cash to buy the black vote. And then Robert Vann was trying to convince him, like, you don't need to buy them. Just give them something. Give them something. Give them something that the government is going to do to help them. And he's like, I don't want token representation. I don't want token representation. We're just going to appoint some people and move on. Yeah. I want you to really do something.
Because Herbert Hoover hadn't really done anything.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And Herbert Hoover hasn't done anything, and they want someone who's going to do something. So some Democrats vote for FDR in 1932. FDR has a massive landslide victory. Now, some scholars say this is the end of the fourth party system. and we move on to the fifth. I don't think so, because in 1932 there were enough black voters where large historic black counties did not vote for FDR yet.
Yeah.
They didn't vote for FDR yet. They didn't trust him.
True.
By 1936, they did.
Yes.
And in 1936, they switch. And black voters are perfectly aligned behind FDR. If you want to learn more about the history of FDR's relationship with the black vote, I recommend you read The Black Cabinet by Jill Watts. She outlines exactly this whole relationship I'm talking about with the black vote and how FDR integrated black people into his cabinet for the first time like no other American politician. And it was hard for him. It was hard for him because, you know, he was like had to appeal. He was a racist.
Yeah.
He had to appeal to Southern Democrats. His wife was not a racist. And it would be wrong of me to talk about this topic without bringing up Mary McLeod Bethune. She was the leader of a black college, a black women's college, I believe, in Florida. And she was a massive, massive inspiration for progressive leaders following her time in service, but she led the National Youth Administration. And this got a lot of black people and poor people, not just black people, proper education in trades and got them on the right footing to be able to, you know, make a life for themselves in the private sector after the end of the first New Deal, even after the end of the second New Deal. And Mary Bethune was able to bring about this black cabinet and organize all these different black politicians and black advisors that existed in the FDR administration. She would get them to come together. And yes, they would argue, they would fight, but she was the glue that held their mission forward. And like, she was the direct lobbyist to FDR because she had a great relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt. There's a really good story of her and Eleanor Roosevelt at the same dinner party. And the group of black women at this dinner party had to sit on one side of the room and the white woman had to sit on the other side of the room. Eleanor Roosevelt took a chair and sat directly in the middle of the two aisles. She was a really outspoken integrationist in this way. But she was, and there was another time where they were at a larger dinner party and Bethune wasn't invited to like sit at this table with everybody else. And Sarah, FDR's mom, and Eleanor, FDR's wife, took both of her hands and walked her and sat down with her next to the table. And so there was this real relationship with Bethune. And then Bethune used that relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt to get to FDR. And she was like the only one that could get meetings with him. Okay. Because FDR, his secretary, was a hardcore white nationalist racist motherfucker. Okay. Hardcore. And he controlled who was seeing FDR every day. So he would pencil in, he would see a black person on the list. He'd be like, no, you're not seeing him today. Okay. Oh, no, these guys want to come in. No, FDR, you're busy. Sorry, you're not seeing him. Okay. And he would try to control the conversations. Point is, FDR didn't do that great of a job. He did a good job, but he didn't do that great of a job. There were a lot of issues with the Civilian Conservation Corps. It actually like was segregated, which was pretty nuts. Black people weren't able to become officers for a while, so black troops in the Civilian Conservation Corps had to be run by white men. There were a lot of cases where black people were getting lynched in these Civilian Conservation Corps camps. Black Conservation Corps members were getting attacked when they were stationed in like white majority areas. So no white community wanted black people to be there. So they were underrepresented. When it was, the whole book is absolutely incredible to learn the racism behind the New Deal. But the black people who tried to fight it anyway. There are so many other names that I wish I could tell you, but I don't remember them. I have them on my phone. I'm not going to pull them up. But just incredible heroes trying to fight for black rights in the FDR administration.
Well, and I feel like the important points here
Yeah.
are like Roosevelt picked black people for his cabinet. That was visible.
Yes.
He made it visible that he was bringing black
cabinet
people
isn't the
into
right word. The first black cabinet official comes in Lyndon B. Johnson's administration, but black advisors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even not technically cabinet, but he made it clear that he was working
Yes.
with black people in the black community. And that was a shift.
There was a
shift.
shift.
Of course, his economic policies in the New Deal, because they disproportionately helped people, the impoverished, they even further disproportionately helped black people.
Yes.
And so it was like even though he just makes a tiny bit of progress and in some ways makes no progress at all on the social treatment
Yes.
of blacks, he helps enormously with their economic situations. And so we talk about like voting with your wallet. Lots of them started voting with their wallet.
And I gotta hit FDR on one more point here. There were multiple times in his administration where he could have pushed for an anti-lynching bill. Senator Wagner, who's one of my favorite senators of this time period, senator from New York, he made the National Labor Relations Board. He proposed an anti-lynching bill, and it got actually very close to passing. Bethune was actually thrown out of the Senate chambers because she clapped after Wagner's speech. She got thrown out because you're not allowed to clap or whatever. So she got thrown out of that. But anyway, FDR refused to support the anti-lynching bill and stopped returning Bethune's calls when she would call and ask for support on this. So listen, there's good and bads, but Bethune was a hardcore Democrat until her dying days. She was a voter of Herbert Hoover, even in 1932.
Wow.
And then she gets appointed into the FDR thing, and she changes course. And that's a really good example of the whole thing. And she goes to bat for FDR in a lot of ways where some Democrats are wanting to switch back to Republican after the Democrats try to hardcore segregate the military and all that. And it just becomes a whole complicated mess. But the point is, African Americans are now with Democrats by this point. Not by a supermajority, but by a majority.
Yes. It turns African Americans, but I feel like we also need to talk about how FDR brings his New Deal coalition, right? It's a ton of it's the working class, obviously. It's everyone who had suffered the most from the Depression. He is able to bring them all in. It's the working class, labor unions, a lot of the middle class, because of how bad the Depression was, and how many people it affected and encompassed. So now you have this person who's a Democrat who solidifies the support of that economic group.
And that's important because William Jennings Bryan in 1896 was able to take the populists, right? Mm-hmm. The impoverished, low-skilled farmer, right? Now FDR is able to keep those populists and then go, hey, you industrialists, you manufacturing workers who want to join a union, I got you too.
Yes. And so even though the management still stuck with the Republicans and has basically until this day, right? We have the beginnings of this is what we think of as our current alignments.
Yes.
Right. So now we've kind of arrived at the current day, or what happens post World War II. These are the kinds of alignments we're looking for. After Roosevelt, the next president I want to talk about is Eisenhower. Eisenhower served from 53 to 1960, and he was technically a Republican, but his policies resemble almost nothing that we would expect to see out of Republicans today. He was super pro-union. He was big on government investment. Probably the thing he is most known for is the national highway system, right? And the massive investment that he made in building out America's highway infrastructure. He supported integration largely. One thing, maybe he wasn't a war hawk even, right?
Nope.
He wanted to withdraw from Korea.
He passed a Civil Rights Act.
He passed a
civil rights
Act.
Not the Civil Rights Act. He passed I think it was the Civil Rights Act of 1957 or something.
Yeah, so it's again, it's hard. It kind of goes to show that this is still the period between Roosevelt and now going into Eisenhower and then further on. That is where everything is liquid. Everything is shifting around as far as what the parties are identified as.
One more thing, Eisenhower also expanded Social Security.
Yeah, he insulted anyone who thought about reducing the entitlements programs that FDR and the New Deal had created.
Yep.
He thought they were idiots. So we move on from there. I think Lyndon Johnson is the next important one to talk about because of the Civil Rights Act.
Yes.
Because of the war on poverty. This completely solidifies the Democrats now. The Democrats are now the party representing civil rights. They're the party on the side of African Americans. They're the one that have their backs. So this is now we are complete 180 from Lincoln.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Lincoln was the Republican who freed the slaves, and now Lyndon Johnson is the Democrat who is putting his political capital on the line to protect them, right? And he's giving away. He's saying no to having the support of white voters in the South in order to protect black people.
Famously, he says we have lost the South for a generation after passing the Civil Rights Act, right? And he does.
Yeah,
the 1964 election is a big shift because this is when Barry Goldwater wins the solid South.
Yes.
For the first time. And, Lyndon Johnson loses Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. These Democrat strongholds are now voting for Barry Goldwater.
Yeah. So this, and up until now, right, the South still votes Republican solidly. So this shift based entirely on racism. I actually read a Princeton study that said they look at other factors of policy changes. They don't explain the shift at all. It is just based on racism. Like I'm sorry, but that's all it is. So the South is now suddenly Republican because the Republicans do not support civil rights, and Nixon kind of solidifies that stance for the Republican Party. And then Reagan comes in, and we still have these similar coalitions, right? Democrats have labor unions, they have progressives on race, they have progressives on like being anti-war, like the Vietnam War protesters, the hippies, kind of, they're very much on the Democratic side rather than the Republicans.
Yeah.
What Reagan does is he brings evangelicals into the fold in a big way. There's a famous pastor who kind of predates Reagan named Jerry Falwell, who starts talking about politics at his sermons. And he talks about how, kind of similar to the rhetoric we would expect to hear today, about how our social life here in America, how our country is deteriorating. And it's because of things like gay people and like rampant abortions that are happening, that we're losing the Christian values that make us who we are. Reagan aligns himself with that. He accepts that. He brings those people into the fold. He says, no, yeah, I will help you restrict abortion rights. I will be on board with you with restricting gay rights. And I think it's interesting to look at Reagan in a way that's similar to Trump, because we're rapidly fast forwarding to the present day here. Reagan himself was not a religious guy. Reagan was married twice. Reagan was pretty alienated from his children. Reagan didn't go to church very often, if at all. But I read an article about this that described evangelicals, and it said that the word that is probably most aligned with evangelical is hypocritical. So it doesn't matter that that's
going to get you a lot of hate.
The candidate, well, what I'm saying is the candidate themselves does not have to be an evangelical. They don't have to be religious, as long as they will serve the interests of the evangelical community.
Absolutely.
So Reagan does that, and he solidifies the evangelicals. And now, right, we say evangelical, that's a synonym for Republican, right? Totally. Synonym. We move on. I'd say most of these presidents don't matter past that as far as changing the alignment of the parties until Trump. Yeah. And so now we have a Republican Party, even though Reagan brings in the evangelicals, the Reagan Republican Party is about trickle-down economics, which means low taxes on everyone, including the rich. It's about being a war hawk, right? Being militarily involved around the world to maintain American dominance. And then also there, but I would say as far as defining their identity, on the back burner are the social issues.
Yes.
When Trump comes in, he puts two completely different issues, I would say, on the front burner. And it is starting to redefine the Republican Party, and we're going to get into that. So Trump's two issues that he put on the table in 2015 when he started campaigning were, one, anti-immigrant sentiment, right? Illegal immigrants are the ones ruining the country. And two, isolationism. He didn't want to be in any wars, and he wanted to isolate us trade-wise from the rest of the world.
Huge.
That's also a huge difference.
Massive.
From the neoliberal Republicans that we know from Reagan.
Dude, George H.W. Bush, the George W. Bush, Reagan, totally polar opposite economic models. Okay?
Yes.
Well, not totally opposite because of the tax cut thing, but like international trade-wise, could not be further away from each other.
Yes, completely the opposite. And so the question is, like, why did this resonate? Well, basically, there was a lot of resentment. And right, this story has been told a ton of times.
Of course.
Ton of resentment in a ton of voters that felt like both parties had completely left them behind, that they were not represented by them. And Trump brings all of these voters into the fold. he uses the immigrants, right, as the perfect outlet for that resentment. It's like, no, this isn't your fault. It's not your fault that things have gone poorly, and you're not bad people for still having these conservative values, these old values that Reagan did first normalize, but that these politicians since haven't represented because of their political correctness being something that alienated them from a lot of these voters that Trump has since pulled in. So he gives them this outlet, and he says all of these politicians are globalist. It doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican. They have been completely okay with outsourcing your jobs to people in other countries who they can pay less. And I'm going to stop that from happening. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect your jobs. And they flock to him. They've completely flocked to him, right? So because of this, so Trump wins 2016. And Republicans lose in 2018, 2020, and 2022. And yet, Trump's grip on the party has not gone anywhere.
No.
Right? And what that's doing is it's making the Republican Party one of these issues that he has seized on. It has transformed this entire story that we've talked about from Reconstruction onwards is a story of politicians testing ideas with coalitions of their base, hearing the feedback, and then the parties realigning to which ideas have gotten the best feedback.
Yeah.
Trump has put these ideas out there. Illegal immigrants bad, protectionism good, liberal, like not even socialist, but social liberalism of like progressive gender ideology, anti-racism, critical race theory is bad because it's making all of you feel bad, right? It's like, it's too hard line. It's too, if you're not completely with us, then you're against us. And it's making they're not right for making you feel bad. Actually, they're bad.
Right.
And Trump puts that all out there and it resonates and you get the feedback. And now the whole Republican Party has become that. And it's not about free international trade. In fact, it's about isolationism. It's not about military interventionism overseas. It's about isolationism. It's America first, right? It's keep out the immigrants, keep out the people that aren't part of America. So where does this leave us as far as who is voting for who, right? Well, the Trump's anti-intellectualism has alienated a large portion of educated voters, specifically educated white voters. Black voters have continued to vote Democrat since Lyndon Johnson, right? They've been like overwhelmingly. People have talked about black voters going away from the Democratic Party occasionally. They voted for Biden like 98% in 2020. Overwhelmingly.
I think black woman was 98%. I think black people overall would be like 92.
No, I said 90 to 8. Yeah, something like that. So black voters are still voting Democrat. Educated white voters have been Republicans for a long time because, one, it serves their economic interests.
Of course.
They're the richer ones, and so they want their taxes to be lower. But also, I would argue, libertarianism economically is a much easier idea, actually, like, to sell to smart people, I think.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Because it's ideologically pure, and it's like, yeah, we're fine with gay marriage. We're fine with being atheists.
Yeah.
It fits with a very secular worldview, but also appeals to the smoothness of the free market, kind of choosing and valuing everything.
But then, yeah, and like let's look at the ideas of like free trade, right?
Yeah.
A college-educated voter doesn't have an interest in free trade, really. They're not involved in manufacturing and doing all that. They don't care.
Exactly.
And I get consumer goods cheaper.
Exactly.
Oh, sounds good to me.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and even past that, you can easily make the argument.
Yeah, the ideological argument too, like the philosophical.
It's lifting people out of poverty,
yeah.
Lifting more people out of poverty, right? So, but now when Trump comes out and he's like, Mexican is sending rapists and thugs, and some of them I assume are good people. That's harder to get on board with. And of course, these people are smart. And so they're still like, but my economic interests, right? That's still, I kind of like that. But then Trump keeps saying it, and he keeps saying it, and he keeps saying it. And he's shedding more and more voters. And then it's not just that. Then January 6th happens, and you see that he's actually going to be a threat to democracy. And these smart people that have any kind of shred of value in them that isn't their own economic interest, they're like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. And so we've seen this happen, though. There was a study done by the Manhattan Institute that looked at the effects of a college degree on the probability that they would vote for Republican. In 1980, the number was like a 60% chance that they would vote, that white college degree holders would vote Republican.
Okay.
In 2020, it was a 30% chance.
That's a decimation right there.
It is totally, like, completely changing the game. So now, but these are the swing voters,
right?
Because there are still lots of them who argue to themselves, my economic interests, they're
These are
worth
the
it.
suburbanites.
Yes. And meanwhile, what I haven't even brought up yet is the white working class, which we talked about has historically been Democrat since FDR, because he's super labor, or in support of unions. They're in support of redistributive economic policies, which is supposed to help the people at the bottom of the economic spectrum. They tend to have more socially conservative values. Yeah. And so they're also the ones that the college-educated, young, liberal wing of the Democratic Party is making to feel like shit, right? They're made to feel like the bad guys. And so it doesn't matter as much that the Democrats are the ones that are trying to serve them with economic policy if they're completely alienating them on social issues.
Yep.
So now there's swing voters. Generally, these white voters, both the working class and college-educated, richer white voters, for these two different reasons. It's like, which are you going to value more, your economic interests or your social interests? And what we tend to see is, at least at like the far end of the working class spectrum, think about rural white voters, right? They're completely Republican.
Totally. Completely
Republican. And it's the suburbanites, right, who generally have college degrees more often, that this is where the percentages are going to shift different amounts and determine who wins national elections as well as statewide.
Yeah. It's important to keep in mind now, like, the lower end of the economic spectrum, $50,000 or less, is won by Democrats. Okay? 50,000 to 100,000, that's won by Republicans. So that's the middle class. 50 to 100,000.
I don't know if that's still true.
I'm pretty sure.
In 2020, it might have shifted
to Democrat and 50 to 90?
Or at least like almost 50-50.
Okay, it might be almost 50-50.
Yeah,
I could see that.
Yeah,
and then 100,000 plus is starting to pull pro-Democrat now. If you break that down, I'm sure if you get over like 3 million.
I think I want you to say that again, because I think you started by saying 50,000 below goes Democrat.
50,000 below goes Democrat. 50,000 to 100,000 goes Republican.
Does 50,000 below even go Democrat anymore, though?
Yes.
Did it go in 2020?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Does that change if we're only looking at white voters?
Yes, it does. It changes a lot if you only look at white voters.
Okay.
If you only look at white voters, that changes everything.
Okay.
Right? White poor voters overwhelmingly support Republicans. Okay. Overwhelmingly.
So that's something that I wanted to talk about, because black voters and Hispanic voters, which are large voting contingencies in the U.S., have been solidly Democrat since the 60s. Solidly. Hispanics started to go for Trump a little bit more in 2020. They were not so solidly Democrat, even though black Americans did stay solidly Democrat.
Yes.
Do you think we are getting far enough away from like legal, written in racism and segregation that black and Hispanic voters are becoming swing voters?
Yep. So now I think what's happening is Hispanic voters are by and large no longer becoming a demographic monolith.
Yes.
They are starting to lean more Republican in a lot of races. They do not view themselves as like an other or like an oppressed class. They genuinely don't. I mean, it's not their experience. And they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. So, African Americans are a different story, but the Hispanic community is becoming more and more white, for a lack of a better word, in their voting patterns, right?
Yeah.
They're just becoming a normal American.
Yeah. What was I
When I say normal American, I mean like, you know what I mean? Like a white, lived here for a longer time and, has not faced racial discrimination.
Yeah, they're assimilated.
Yeah, assimilated.
Basically.
Thank you.
And I also think there is some polling data to suggest that Mexican Americans or no, Latinos in general they're more anti-immigration than other native-born Americans.
Depends on which Latinos you're polling from which state, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, there's an idea of like, I got here the right way. You have to get here the right way too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of it. But yeah, I want to just circle back to this income thing, because in 2020, making less than $50,000 an hour, $50,000 a year, 55% voted for Biden, 44% voted for Trump.
Okay.
50,000 or more, 51% voted for Biden, 47% voted for Trump. If we break that down to a little more, 100,000 or more ends up voting Republican. Okay? 100,000 or more votes Republican.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you break that down through college education, I don't know how that works out. Because if you break it down through college education, then it's no longer the case. Democrats win all the college education stuff, pretty much.
Yeah. And one other interesting thing about this Manhattan Institute study is that college is seen to make people Democratic.
Yeah.
People who go into college unaffiliated come out Democratic more often.
I went into college as a, conservative libertarian / Republican. 2 years in, I was a libtard.
Yeah. And that's probably why Republicans are terrified of colleges. They're Democratic factories.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there was something else that I had to talk about, and now I'm completely forgetting it. I feel like we've covered most of the alignments, though, right?
Yeah,
like
I think the main another big one is age, right?
Sure.
Because now Democrats are winning the younger voter at a way larger margin than they ever have before.
Yes.
In the 2000 elections between Gore and Bush, it was tied. Now it's like voters in the 2020 election by age are just overwhelmingly voting Democrat.
Because social issues are completely at the forefront of the mind of young voters.
Yes.
And it is so uncool to be homophobic.
So uncool.
And racist.
That's so cringe.
So uncool.
So like 18 to 29-year-olds, 60% voted for Biden, 36% voted for Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's not sustainable.
You don't think so?
No. For the Republicans?
Oh.
No, I mean, like, the Republicans need a change.
I suppose, but there's also evidence that young people get more, like, they vote conservative more as they age.
That hasn't happened in America to the millennials.
No, that has happened.
No, it hasn't.
Yes, they have become more conservative.
No, they have not.
Yes, they totally have.
No, they have not. Nope, this broke the cycle. The millennials broke that cycle.
I can find an article for you right now that says that they do.
I can find you an article right now that says they don't.
Okay, which means that we shouldn't have this conversation. We should both try to go a little bit deeper.
That sounds fair.
Okay. Yeah, that makes... And meanwhile, old people are still conservative, which they have been always.
But then it's confusing because if you look at polls right now, Biden wins over 65. Which why I don't give a shit about the polls right now, to be honest with you. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
That is weird.
The polls have the young people tied and then Biden winning 65.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't matter.
The social conservatives will be the older people.
Right. But point is, guys, we just went through the whole history of the party systems in America.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah. Just, again, swing voters are suburbanites, both working class whites, college educated whites.
Yep.
Hispanics, maybe black people.
Yep.
Soon. Young people are Democrats. Old people are Republicans. People who used to be solid are more in flux right now.
I think it's crazy that all of a sudden Democrats have been the ones to want to fund a foreign war, are pro-free global trade. Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's completely flipped.
And
I think it's all because of Trump.
Yeah. If Trump wasn't around, I feel like this would have been still a uniparty consensus.
Yeah.
Of just being like, oh, yeah, NAFTA good. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
support Ukraine and all that.
Totally.
That would have
Democrats
been
are they're just the party of normalcy now.
Normalcy now.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's all it is.
That was a really good deep dive.
Yeah, I like that.
That was really good.
It's fun.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.